Chapter 3990. During the trip to the hot spring, Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja had taken good care of her. Liang Yin also knew what kind of person Yun Shishir was. She was Mu Yaja's wife, the wife of the CEO of the Shengyu Corporation, and the goddess of the entertainment industry. Her status was so high that no one could shake it. Li Jing's blasphemy finally made her explode. She was gauging the heart of a gentleman with her own mean measure. No one would believe that Yun Shishir would ignore Mu Yaja's protection and run off to flirt with another man. It was not that Qin Zhou was not as outstanding as Mu Yaja, but Yun Shishir did not have to do that. Moreover, Qin Zhou and Mu Yaja were close friends. With Mu Yaja's methods, there was nothing that could be hidden from him. He and Qin Zhou were so close, which only proved that there was nothing between Qin Zhou and Yun Shishir. It was one thing for Li Jing to criticize her, but she even humiliated Qin Zhou and Yun Shishir. This was something that Liang Yin could not stand. You're not allowed to humiliate Qin Zhou and Yun Shishir like this. Liang Yin said angrily, Li Jing, I respect you as my senior, so I've always been very polite to you. But don't take my respect for you as a disrespect. People care about their dignity. Do you think others don't know why you were kicked out of the production team? Hearing this, Li Jing's face changed and turned ashen. What do you mean by that? Liang Yin snorted and said, almost everyone is spreading the news about you, fooling around in the production team. There's no smoke without fire. You can't deny this, right? Li Jing's face darkened. What nonsense are you talking about? Whether it's nonsense or not, you know it in your heart. Do you still need me to say it? Who did you hear this from? Liang Yin did not expose Hua Jin. She subconsciously felt that Li Jing was a rather sinister woman. She had also heard that anyone who could enter the entertainment industry definitely had some tricks up their sleeves. Therefore, she did not dare to reveal what Hua Jin had said. She only said, it's not just one person who said that. It spread throughout the crew. Everyone doesn't say it on the surface, but in their hearts, they all know why the director sent you flying. So, don't suspect that I'm the one who squeezed you out and stole your role. If you acted well and the director was satisfied, would he need to send you away? Humph! Li Jing immediately calmed down and sneered, but there was obvious sarcasm. Do you think I don't know? Was the director satisfied? My acting skills are not something a fledgling like you can compare to. Ha! Liang Yin didn't want to waste her breath arguing with this kind of person. She knew that Li Jing was mocking her. She must have followed the unspoken rules of the assistant director. She was no longer the Liang Yin of the past. She couldn't tell what was going on, but she couldn't be bothered to point it out. It wouldn't do her much good to argue with a narrow-minded person like Li Jing. So she brought Qin Zhou into the picture. As you know, I'm an artist personally managed by Qin Zhou. Just like you said, if I really relied on underhanded means to get to where I am, aren't you afraid of offending me and Qin Zhou? Qin Zhou had previously told her, if they were to encounter any troublesome matters, then they would not hesitate to use his name to suppress the situation. In the entertainment industry, there was no situation that Qin Zhou couldn't handle. Sure enough, when she heard Qin Zhou's name, Li Jing did retreat. Just as Liang Yin thought, she really didn't dare to offend Qin Zhou. Chapter 3991. Liang Yin didn't want to be entangled with her any longer and returned to her seat. At that moment, Qin Zhou had already arrived. Liang Yin sat down slowly. When she saw Qin Zhou, she put aside the unhappiness from earlier and said to him, why are you so late? You still have the cheek to talk about Qin Zhou. Hua Jin complained. Didn't you go to the washroom? Why did you take so long? As he spoke, Hua Jin noticed from the corner of his eye that Li Jing had also returned to the seat next door with a gloomy face. He could not help but feel suspicious. Seeing that Li Jing had also returned from the direction of the restroom, he asked Liang Yin, was she in the restroom just now? Yeah. She didn't deliberately make things difficult for you, right? Hua Jin probed with concern. Liang Yin immediately smiled. She knows that I'm under Qin Zhou, so she wouldn't dare to make things difficult for me. Humph, humph, humph. She's like a fox assuming the tiger's might. Hua Jin laughed. When Qin Zhou heard this, he more or less understood what was going on. Meeting Li Jing here by chance. Li Jing knew about Liang Yin. She also knew that the role of Gu Huanyao had been replaced by Liang Yin. Losing such an important role was enough for Li Jing to be depressed. It was inevitable that she would wonder what methods Liang Yin had used to get the role. Qin Zhou kept this matter in his heart and planned to deal with this stumbling block later. Even though Li Jing wasn't an important role, it was necessary to show her who was the boss. Liang Yin hadn't officially debuted yet. This thorn in her side definitely couldn't be left alive. "Let's eat," Qin Zhou said. Liang Yin and Hua Jin looked at each other and started eating. As Qin Zhou ate, he asked, "The day after tomorrow is the little princess's birthday. Have you thought of a gift?" Hua Jin slapped his forehead. "I haven't bought anything yet. I don't know what to buy." Soon, Yueyao would turn 3. This child's gift was the hardest to think of. Giving her jewelry would be too tacky. After all, the other party was a 3-year-old child. The gold and silver jewelry were all given by the older generation. Children would definitely like children's items, but this was the most difficult thing to imagine. Building blocks? The Mu family's children's room was filled with the most popular toys. Yueyao's second brother was the chairman of Leji Holdings. It could be said that all of Yueyao's childhood toys had been bought by Yu. He couldn't give her the toy. Then, Hua Jin probed Qin Zhou. "What do you plan to give her?" "I've already ordered a BJD doll a year in advance. It's made according to Yueyao's appearance. It's a private custom-made one." Hua Jin was speechless. "That should be very expensive, right?" "It's not expensive. It's only $300,000. "How could this be called not expensive?" Hua Jin's lips twitched. This Qin Zhou was too cunning. He had actually started planning this year's birthday gift a year in advance. This time, Hua Jin was very troubled. He didn't know what to give her. Liang Yin, who was standing beside him, was even more confused. A few $100,000 was not expensive? Poverty had limited her imagination. Hua Jin said, "Liang Yin, let me ask you something. What gift did you wish to receive when you were young?" When Liang Yin heard this, she looked a little uncomfortable. "I didn't celebrate my birthday when I was young." "Why?" "Because..." Liang Yin laughed dryly. "No one remembers my birthday. After a while, I felt that birthdays were not necessary." Chapter 39-92. She had grown up in a broken family and had never had a complete family, let alone a complete birthday. It was as if her birth wasn't worth celebrating. Hua Jin saw the loneliness on her face and thought that he had touched her sore spot. He said awkwardly, "Sorry. Why are you apologizing?" Liang Yin hurriedly explained, "Actually, I don't think it's a big deal. I don't really care about birthdays, but if it were me when I was young..." She thought for a while and said slowly, "No matter what the present is, as long as it's a birthday present, I will like it very much." "Really?" "Yeah. Actually, it doesn't matter what the present is. What's important is the thought behind it. When you open the present, nothing can compare to the feeling of anticipation. It doesn't matter if it's expensive or not. What's important is the feeling of anticipation and surprise." Qin Zhou looked deeply at Liang Yin but didn't say anything. Instead, he pretended to ask casually, "When is your birthday?" I don't seem to remember. I don't really celebrate my birthday." Hua Jin asked Qin Zhou. "Qin Zhou, help me think. What should I choose for Yueyao's birthday?" "Think about it yourself." Qin Zhou snorted. "Don't you think it's a little late to be thinking about a birthday present now? If you had prepared it earlier, you wouldn't have been so flustered." Hua Jin ignored him and said to Liang Yin, "Accompany me to the mall tomorrow." Qin Zhou immediately interrupted Hua Jin. "She has class tomorrow. If you want to go, you can go by yourself." Hua Jin's face was full of resentment. Seeing Hua Jin's regretful face, Liang Yin couldn't help but laugh. "How about this? I'm free tomorrow night, so I can accompany you to the mall." "Great. Hooray." Hua Jin gave Qin Zhou a look as if he was showing off. Liang Yin smiled, but the corners of her lips suddenly froze. She didn't know why, but she was inexplicably envious of Yueyao. There was even an element of jealousy. Of course, her jealousy wasn't malicious. She was simply envious that Yueyao was able to grow up in such a beautiful environment. Her mother doted on her, and her father doted on her. Everyone in the family treated her like a precious pearl. People were born different from each other. At night, when Qin Zhou returned home, he passed by the study. He suddenly thought of something and walked into the study. There was a stack of documents on the desk. He casually picked it up and pulled out a few pages. He flipped to one of the pages. It was information about Liang Yin. On it was Liang Yin's ID number. With the ID number, Qin Zhou obtained her date of birth. Generally speaking, the birth date on the identity certificate was usually the Gregorian calendar. Then, in terms of the lunar calendar, at the beginning of the next month. Qin Zhou smiled, closed the file and left the study. Hua Jin pestered Liang Yin to go to the mall to buy a gift. In the end, under Liang Yin's guidance, they finally chose a princess dress. Liang Yin liked it very much. Hua Jin didn't know how to choose a birthday gift for a girl. But when he saw that Liang Yin had chosen a dress that was suitable and beautiful, he bought it for 20,000 yuan. Chapter 39-93. It happened to be the weekend on Yueyao's birthday. Hua Jin originally wanted to bring Yueyao along, but Yueyao had to stay with the crew to catch up on the progress. Therefore, she asked Hua Jin to bring the gift she had prepared for her. Hua Jin did not expect Liang Yin to be so thoughtful as to secretly prepare a gift. He did not know what she had prepared. Along the way, his curiosity was about to explode. He stared at the gift box anxiously, but in the end, he restrained himself. When Hua Jin arrived at the Mu family's house with Liang Yin's gift, he realized that the gifts from relatives and friends were piled up on the floor of the living room. Yun Shishir sat on the floor with Yueyao in her arms, encouraging her to open the gifts. On the side, Yu Yu and Xiaoi Chen provided assistance. After all, it was really tiring to open so many gifts. All the guests stood at the side with smiles on their faces, watching Yueyao open the gifts. Everyone wanted to see if Yueyao liked the gifts they had given her. Most of the guests were close to the Mu family. Some were senior executives of Shengyu Financial Group, and some were personal friends of Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir. Hua Jin glanced casually and saw a key lying quietly in a diamond-studded gift box at the side. This key was quite retro. It had a hollow rose pattern, like the style of a medieval European palace. He asked Yun Shishir curiously, "Who gave you this key?" Yun Shishir looked up and smiled helplessly. "Xiao Jie gave it to me." "He gave you a key?" Hua Jin was a little suspicious. He picked up the key, but could not figure out what it was. He did not know what the purpose of this key was. Yun Shishir said helplessly, "It's the key to a castle." Hua Jin was speechless. Gong Jie gave Yueyao a castle? Had he always been so generous? The castle. I heard that it also comes with an island. Hua Jin mumbled, "What a big deal." Little Jie said that he only has one niece, so of course he has to give everything he has. However, I also joked that if he gave Yueyao a castle and an island every year for her birthday, he would probably go bankrupt before Yueyao reached adulthood. Yu Yu looked up and revealed a sinister smile on her exquisite face. "When it's my birthday, he'll give me a castle too. That'll be interesting." As far as he knew, Gong Jie owned 4 castles, 6 islands, and 3 private jets. Xiaoi Chen had always been thinking about the super luxury yacht under Gong Jie's name. He planned to ask him for it on his birthday. Hua Jin carefully put the key, which was worth tens of millions of dollars, aside and rubbed his hands. At the same time, he passed the birthday gifts that he and Liang Yin had prepared for Yun Shishir. "Here, this is the birthday gift I prepared for Yueyao." Yun Shishir took it and realized that there were 2 gifts. "Why did you give me 2? One is for Liang Yin." "Liang Yin? Ah." Yun Shishir suddenly remembered. "Is she the girl who was with you on that vacation?" "Yeah." "By the way, the gift is here. Why don't I see her?" Chapter 39-94. Hua Jin said, "She's been busy recently and didn't have time to come, so she asked me to send the gift over. She said that she wanted to thank you for your hospitality and care last time. Also, she asked me to wish Yueyao a happy birthday." As he spoke, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Did humans really have a 6th sense? At least he felt that they did, because he really did feel that a terrifying demon king was standing behind him. Hua Jin turned around in horror, only to see Gong Jie standing behind him, looking down at him. Gulp! The sound of him swallowing his saliva. Yun Shirshir looked at Hua Jin and then at Gong Jie, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. She didn't know why, but whenever the two of them met, there would always be a tense confrontation. They couldn't get along well at all. Yun Shirshir helplessly tugged at Gong Jie's sleeve and asked hesitantly, Why are you staring at Hua Jin like that? It's as if you want to swallow him alive." Gong Jie turned around. When he faced Yun Shirshir, he immediately smiled gently. "Why would I, sister?" When he faced Yun Shirshir, his smile was as gentle as it was gentle. Hua Jin quickly diverted his attention. He squatted in front of Yueyao and clapped his hands to attract her attention. "Uncle Hua Jin will open the present with you. Okay?" Yueyao shook her head and said in a childish voice, "I can't open it anymore. I want to play with this." The little fellow was only 3 years old. She still had a childish voice. If one had to describe her, it would be like a kitten that had just been weaned off milk, squeaking and squeaking. She had just grown a new row of teeth, and when she smiled, it was as if she was encrusted with a beautiful shell. Because it was her birthday, Yun Shirshir helped Yueyao change into a beautiful princess dress. The fluffy skirt wrapped around her fair and tender legs, and she wore a crown of the Ice Snow Princess series on her head. Anyone who saw her couldn't help but want to hug her. However, not everyone could hug this noble little princess. With Yu and Xiaoichen around, and Muyaja, Yueyao's little feet usually didn't even have a chance to touch the ground. Yun Shirshir always said that even if she was a girl, she should not be so spoiled, lest she developed princess syndrome. In the end, what did Muyaja say? "My Muyaja's daughter is a princess syndrome?" It was rare for Gong Jie to speak up from his brother-in-law's perspective. "Our Yueyao was born a little princess. What's wrong with being delicate like a princess?" Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she also felt a little worried. With Muyaja and Gong Jie, the two of them doted on Yueyao so much. In addition, there were 2 older brothers. However, the most amusing thing was that Yun Shirshir didn't really spoil Yueyao, but Yueyao was the closest to her. Muyaja was also very surprised. Once, he specially asked Yueyao about everyone's ranking in her heart. Yueyao's ranking was like this. Yun Shirshir was the most senior. Then, in order, Muyaja, Yu, Gong Jie, Xiaoichen, Hua Jin. Gong Jie felt especially wronged. He doted on Yueyao as much as Muyaja, so why was his ranking so low? Chapter 39-95. Yun Shirshir accompanied Yueyao the most. Even though she was a little strict with Yueyao at times and played the role of the bad cop the most, Yueyao was still the closest to her, which made many people jealous. Hua Jin immediately said, "Then uncle will take you to the yard to play. Okay?" Yueyao immediately opened his little arms when he heard this. Many of the guests had brought their own children and they were all playing in the yard. Yueyao was tired of opening the gifts and gradually lost interest. Hence, he wanted to go to the yard to play. Hua Jin was about to carry him when Gong Jie squatted down and teased Yueyao. "Uncle will carry you. Okay?" Yueyao looked at Hua Jin, then at Gong Jie. Suddenly, he threw himself into Hua Jin's arms. Gong Jie was speechless. He was completely stunned. Yueyao actually didn't choose him. Didn't they say that his ranking was higher than Hua Jin's? How did this little girl change her attitude so quickly? Yun Shirshir laughed heartily. She leaned close to Gong Jie's ear and whispered, "Some time ago, Hua Jin bought Yueyao her favorite doll from the Frozen series." Gong Jie's face darkened even more. Weren't they just 2 dolls? What was so great about that? Hua Jin felt a sense of accomplishment when he saw Yueyao throwing herself at him. He felt comforted, but at the same time he felt a little worried. As petty as Gong Jie, he wouldn't hold a grudge, right? Forget it. Anyway, he had always been at odds with Gong Jie. It wasn't a big deal to hold a grudge against him. Hua Jin carried Yueyao and walked into the yard. Yun Shirshir had decorated the yard into a small garden. The flower bed was filled with Chinese roses, a swing, a seesaw, and a musical fountain. The yard was very big. Because it was a garden villa, the yard alone occupied more than 1,000 square meters. The children were playing hide and seek. Yueyao also wanted to join in. However, Hua Jin was afraid of playing hide and seek. It was inevitable that he would have to hide and walk. If he accidentally fell and left a faint scar on the little princess's flawless body, Mu Yaja and Gong Jie would definitely have the urge to chop him up. Hence, he was easy to coax. Fortunately, Yueyao was easy to coax and let her obediently sit on the swing and let Hua gently push her from behind. Standing at the balcony entrance, Yun Shirshir looked on with gratification. Turning her head, she saw Gong Jie staring at the swing too. Her lips curled into a smile. Have you been busy recently? I went back to the Gong residence a while ago. Gong Jie paused for a moment before replying nonchalantly. He wants to meet you. The smile on Yun Shirshir's lips froze when she heard that. Him? She didn't need to ask to know that him was probably referring to Gong Xiaoying. It was too sudden. She didn't expect Gong Xiaoying to take the initiative to ask to see her. Isn't he no longer in the Gong residence? He's back. Gong Jie continued. Of course, if you don't want to see him, I won't reply to him. Okay. Yun Shirshir's tone suddenly turned cold. I wanted to see him too. This is the first and last time we're meeting as father and daughter. Rather than a meeting, it was more appropriate to call it a negotiation. It was time to put an end to the past grudges. She didn't want such a man to appear in her life again. It was about time to end everything once and for all. Chapter 3996. Gong Jie smiled and said, Sure. Initially, he did not want to mention this at the birthday party as he was afraid that she would be upset. However, from what he knew, Yun Shirshir would not be upset because of this. She was also looking forward to meeting Gong Xiaoying. After so long, Yun Shirshir also understood that perhaps Gong Xiaoying did not have any ill intentions towards her and Yu. It was just that he had used the wrong method to satisfy his greed. And his greed was just like what Gong Jie had said. He was just an old father who wanted to reunite with his family. However, he could not shirk his responsibility for erasing Yu's memory, which indirectly led to the destruction of Yu's first personality. She could not forgive him. She felt that Gong Xiaoying had betrayed her mother once, and she had no right to comment on that. That was a grudge between the previous generation. However, imprisoning Yu and turning him into a tool for his own benefit was a second betrayal. A betrayal to her. Gong Xiaoying blamed her for being so resolute. And she also hated him for being so heartless. Gong Jie had not expected that Yun Shirshir would be willing to meet Gong Xiaoying. From her expression, it was as if she was talking about the past with an old friend. He could not even see any resentment in her eyes. Instead, it was a kind of calmness that did not care. He had not expected that she would be willing to meet Gong Xiaoying. Perhaps Gong Xiaoying was afraid. He was afraid that meeting her would break all ties. Hence, Gong Xiaoying had been avoiding Gong Jie. He was afraid that Yun Shirshir would take the initiative to meet him. Hence, like a coward, he suddenly disappeared without a trace. Yun Shirshir thought that he had disappeared and would not appear in her world. She did not expect that Gong Xiaoying would suddenly ask to see her. As if they had a tacit understanding, the father and daughter both vaguely understood that this meeting might mean a break between the two of them. However, she still had to see him. Behind them, Yu could vaguely hear their conversation. However, the moment Yun Shirshir and Gong Jie turned around, she immediately hid in a dark corner. It was not until Gong Jie and Yun Shirshir were far away that he walked out from the corner in a daze. He vaguely heard his mother say that she wanted to meet that man. He was a little worried. The day after the birthday party, Gong Xiaoying found out that Yun Shirshir was willing to meet him. So he put aside all his work and asked Gong Jie to arrange a meeting between him and Yun Shirshir. Not long after, Gong Xiaoying flew to the capital. They arranged to meet at a secluded villa of Gong Jie in the capital at 6 o'clock in the evening. Yun Shirshir would show up as promised. For the entire night, Gong Xiaoying could not sleep peacefully. He repeatedly pondered in his heart about how he should tell his daughter that he had not seen her for so many years and how he missed her and felt guilty for her. He was not very good at saying sentimental things, but it was obvious that this might be the last chance for the two of them to meet again. The second time they met might be at his funeral. Thus, he wanted to seize the opportunity to organize what he wanted to say to the Fate Society. However, the more he thought about it, the more confused his thoughts became. In the morning, Gong Jie called to say that he would be accompanying Yao in the evening, so the meeting time was set at noon. After lunch, she would come. Gong Xiaoying acted as if he was facing a formidable enemy. He deliberately styled his hair and changed into a formal suit, looking especially formal. Chapter 39-97. Yun Shirshir was very punctual. In this aspect, she was very much like him. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Yun Shirshir and Gong Jie arrived on time. Gong Xiaoying was sitting in the living room. His assistant received the news and rushed to the door. Soon, he walked to his side and whispered in his ear, "They're here." When he heard this, his body inexplicably stiffened, as though he was nervous. Gong Xiaoying straightened his back and looked up. He saw Yun Shirshir's slightly slender figure appear at the door. Gong Jie came with her, but he did not enter. Instead, he stood at the door, gave her a few instructions, and turned to leave. Gong Xiaoying also gave his assistant a look. "You may leave." "Yes." The assistant immediately left respectfully. Yun Shirshir slowly walked through the door. Behind her, the door slowly closed. She walked to the sofa opposite Gong Xiaoying. First, she looked at him calmly. Then, she closed her legs and slowly sat down. Gong Xiaoying did not try to hide his gaze as it landed directly on her body. The first thing that came to his mind was that Mu Qingqing had actually given birth to such a beautiful daughter for him. She had a delicate and beautiful face, and her black hair was soft and smooth. There was no extra embellishment, but it was already charming enough. She was wearing a simple dress and a knitted jacket. It was simple, but it gave people a feeling of a cool breeze. Yun Shirshir was silent. Perhaps she was waiting for him to speak first. Gong Xiaoying was also silent for a long time. Suddenly, he closed his eyes. As a father, he was the first to break the silence. "Thank you for coming to see me. I thought you didn't want to see me." When Yun Shirshir heard this, there was not much expression on her face. Instead, she asked in return, "Why are you willing to see me? I thought you wanted to hide from me forever." "Indeed." Gong Xiaoying smiled self-deprecatingly. "At first, I didn't dare to see you because I felt guilty and uneasy. I was afraid that you would make a decision with me. But someone told me." He paused and inhaled a breath of cold air. "Someone told me that if I kept hiding from you and refused to see you, I might not have the chance to see you again in this lifetime." With a sigh, Gong Xiaoying looked a little worried. "I also think it's funny. Why are we father and daughter, but we're like enemies? I won't forgive you." Yun Shirshir also spoke up, but her tone was firm. "I hate you." Only these 3 words. Gong Xiaoying felt as if his heart was being pierced. In fact, he hadn't expected what she would say. The only thing he had expected was that she would say these 3 words, "I hate you." Even though he had expected this, he still felt his heart ache when she casually uttered those 3 words. "I know that you hate me." Gong Xiaoying pursed his lips helplessly. "I also know that you're here to sever our relationship as father and daughter. I know all these." Yun Shirshir heard this, but she looked down coldly. Gong Xiaoying clenched the cane in his hand. This time, he had let go of all his pride and all his hatred for the Mu family. He did not want to hate anyone, and he did not have the right to. Perhaps he was a successful businessman. As a businessman, his achievements were eye-catching and unparalleled. But whether it was as a husband or a father, he was a failure. Chapter 39-98. As her husband, he had made that woman wait her whole life, but he did not return. As her father, his daughter had turned against him and told him that she hated him. She even wanted to cut off their father-daughter relationship. Gong Xiaoying knew that he was guilty. However, he hoped that Yun Shirshir could return to his side and reunite with him. However, he had used the wrong method. He had pinned the feud between the Gong and Mu families on Yun Shirshir. The saddest thing for a person was to gradually become the person he hated the most. He used to hate the Mu family so much, but now he had become the executioner he hated the most. I'm sorry. Gong Xiaoying sighed heavily. He looked up, and in an instant, there was a lot of vicissitudes in his eyes. I know that you must hate me very much, and I won't shamelessly beg you to forgive me. However, I'm already very satisfied to be able to see you again. When Yun Shirshir heard this, she did not show it on the surface, but there were waves of emotions in her heart. Grievance, resentment, confusion, and doubt. More than that, she felt sad for her mother. She tugged at the corner of her lips and gave an extremely pale smile. Do you know? You're sorry, but no matter how many times you say it, it's useless. You also feel guilty towards my mother, but no matter how many times you say sorry, she can't return to your side, and she can't return to my side. You've made her love you all her life, wait for you all her life, and hate you all her life. Is this something that can be redeemed with just a few words of apology? Gong Xiaoying fell into a deep silence. Yun Shirshir continued. Once you've caused harm to someone, no matter how many times you apologize, it won't be able to offset the harm. She can't come back, and you can't go back either. Gong Xiaoying's eyes throbbed. He hated himself for not fighting for it, and hated himself even more for making Mu Qingqing wait for so long in vain. Yun Shirshir took a deep breath and asked, Why did you erase Yu's memory back then? I hope, Gong Xiaoying paused and explained, I hope that he can stay by my side. After all, he is the blood of the Gong family. I don't recognize the Mu family, and I don't recognize that brat Mu Yaja either. Then, Yun Shirshir asked coldly, Can you return Yu to me? Hasn't he already returned to your side? Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows and suddenly said hoarsely, He did come back to my side, but the old Yu has completely disappeared. He's no longer here. The current Yu has become a little unfamiliar. He can't go back to how he used to be. After pausing for a few seconds, she glared at Gong Xiaoying with hatred. It's you. If it's not you, you would never become like this. Do you know how much pain he's in now? Gong Xiaoying didn't want to explain himself, but at the mention of Yu, he couldn't help but say, If I didn't bring him back to the Gong family, his condition might have deteriorated rapidly. Do you know his condition? Yun Shirshir was stunned. His condition isn't optimistic. If he didn't recuperate in the Gong family, his organs might have gradually withered. Gong Xiaoying wasn't lying about this. This was also the reason why Gong Jie didn't hate Gong Xiaoying that much. Chapter 3999. And reality had proven that Gong Xiaoying's actions were indeed effective. Yu's health was gradually improving. His heart's function had also increased by more than 5 times. At least, his body was no longer as weak as before. It was just that Gong Xiaoying did not tell anyone. It was fine if others misunderstood him. But Yun Shirshir could not. He still had a selfish motive. He wanted to let her know his good intentions clearly. At least, for this reason, even if she did not forgive him, at least she did not want to cut off all contact with him. This was already a plea. Gong Xiaoying was such a proud man. He was high-spirited and arrogant all his life. Only in front of Yun Shirshir did he lower his voice. Perhaps it was because Yun Shirshir and Mu Qingqing looked too much alike. When he saw this daughter, it was as if he could see through her soul and see the woman he once loved deeply. His heart melted into a puddle. He poured all the guilt and love he had for Mu Qingqing into her, hoping to make up for his regrets and mistakes. Whether she appreciated it or not, he could not decide. He only hoped that even if she pitied him, she would not be so ruthless. Don't think that I'm her. Are you trying to brush me off with such words? Yun Shirshir said angrily. You can't go back to how he was before, and this is all thanks to you. Gong Xiaoying, what is your heart made of? Is it cold? You caused my mother to suffer for her entire life, and you want to turn my world upside down before you are satisfied, right? Gong Xiaoying shook his head, but he could only shake his head. He could not explain anything else. Can you think of a way to make him go back to how he was before? Yun Shirshir bit her lip hard and clenched her fists nervously. She was looking forward to Gong Xiaoying's other methods to wake up the old Yu. She wanted the old Yu to come back. Gong Xiaoying said calmly. He has a split personality. Do you know about this? Yun Shirshir said. Now I know. I didn't know about this before. Because he's too good at hiding. Gong Xiaoying's eyes revealed a rare look of admiration. This child has always known how to dote on others. He dotes on you and wants to protect you, so he only reports the good news and not the bad news. Is there no other way? Gong Xiaoying said. What if I say yes? Yun Shirshir's originally lifeless eyes seemed to have been dyed with light all of a sudden. Her eyes widened. Really? Or we can go back to the past and have the two personalities live in the same body. However, this is very painful. Two personalities coexisting is very dangerous. Sooner or later, he won't be able to bear the burden. Because his two personalities are opposites, they will never be able to merge or accept each other. They are destined to clash. Yun Shirshir's heart ached when she heard this. The old Yu had two personalities coexisting. In front of her, he was innocent and obedient, kind and pure. But the other side was perhaps unimaginably cold. Did they have to go back to this? She couldn't bear to. She didn't want Yu to suffer like this. Then, didn't you say there was another way? Yun Shirshir was full of hope. What is it? Gong Xiaoying raised his eyes. His once handsome face was now filled with vicissitudes. Or, we can awaken the first personality and let that personality kill the second personality with his own hands so that the first personality can regain his dominant position. Chapter 4000. The corners of Gong Xiaoying's lips curved upwards. In fact, the first personality will never be killed. That's because the first personality is the original personality while the second personality is a derivative personality. Many studies have shown that other than the first personality, all other personalities will be killed except for the first personality. Even if he disappears, he will be temporarily sealed up. The way to awaken the first personality is very simple. However, if you want the first personality to take over, unless the first personality kills the second personality, it's very difficult to do so. Yun Shirshir felt a stab of pain in her heart. Regardless of whether it was the first personality or the second personality, they were both her Yu. Whether it was the kind Yu or the cold Yu, they were both her flesh and blood. Regardless of which personality it was, she didn't want to give up easily. The first personality killing the second personality? Why did she have to make Yu go through such a cruel decision? No. Yun Shirshir's lips suddenly trembled violently. Is there no other way? Gong Xiaoying shook his head silently. Shirshir, I understand your feelings. Just like me, I also hope that Yu will be well. It's just that there's no way to make it perfect. You understand my feelings? When Yun Shirshir heard that, she sneered coldly. You understand? If you understand, you won't be so cruel as to kill Yu's first personality. I didn't kill it. Gong Xiaoying's tone was very calm. No matter how good I am, I can't infiltrate the child's consciousness. What I'm saying may sound a little abstract, but to put it simply, other than the second personality, no one can communicate with the first personality. Yun Shirshir's face froze as if she was frozen. I don't believe it. Her gaze was empty as she muttered. I don't believe that there's only one cruel way. There must be another way. Shirshir. Yun Shirshir suddenly stood up. You're not allowed to call me that. You have no right to call me that. Gong Xiaoying was speechless. He didn't dare to say anything else, afraid that he would accidentally say something that would anger her. She was too sensitive. He had to tread carefully. Calm down. Maybe there are other ways. Give me a little more time. I'll definitely think of something. No need. What method can you think of? The only method you can think of is the cruel method. The only method you can think of is to kill the personality cruelly. You are the executioner. In a fit of anger, Yun Shirshir spoke without thinking. Because of her words, Gong Xiaoying's heart ached so much that he almost suffocated. However, he did not say a word. He remained silent and let her vent. He understood that her emotions had accumulated to a critical point and needed to explode. He allowed her to vent her emotions. That's all for today. I hope you can respect yourself and stop interfering with my life in the future. Yun Shirshir added. No matter what, Yu is my son. No matter what, I will find the old Yu. You don't have to worry about anything else." After saying that, she left without looking back. Gong Xiaoying stood up and wanted to chase after her. However, when he saw how determined she was, he didn't have the courage to do so. He had lost. He admitted defeat. However, he had only himself to blame. Chapter 4001. Gong Xiaoying let out a heavy sigh and fell back onto the sofa. His face was expressionless. The door opened again. Gong Jie walked in and saw him sitting in the dark, looking desolate. He finally spoke. "Father." Gong Xiaoying grunted. "How is she?" "She left. I've already asked the chauffeur to send her back." "Send her back. Otherwise I won't be at ease." "Then you don't have to worry about me." Gong Xiaoying waved his hand weakly. "I'll just sit here alone." Gong Jie didn't say anything else. He turned around and left. The door closed again. However, Gong Xiaoying didn't notice that in the corner of the escalator on the second floor, a figure was slowly hiding in the corner. Yu stood in the corner expressionlessly. Earlier on, when he heard what Yun Shirshir and Gong Xiaoying said, he actually felt a little upset. Disappointment, grievance, loneliness, unwillingness, guilt. He knew that the once innocent and adorable Yu occupied an unshakable position in Yun Shirshir's heart. He also understood that even if he gave everything he had, he might not be able to replace Yu's position in Yun Shirshir's heart. However, he still wanted to try. Therefore, he occupied this body and stayed by Yun Shirshir's side only to gain recognition. He wanted to replace Yu. However, it seemed that he couldn't do it. No one could ever replace another person. Everyone was independent and no one could replace them. But why couldn't he? Was he not good enough? Was he not as good as Yu? He was already trying hard to change. His mother liked to see him smile. Even though he wasn't used to smiling in front of others, he was trying hard to become sunny and play the role of an innocent and pure person. However, he was originally a second personality, a personality born from darkness. How could he transform into the real sunshine? This was a form of suppression in disguise. He had also thought of giving up. She wanted to give up and let the original Yu return to her body. As for him, he chose to sleep forever and never wake up. But he couldn't do it. Even if he was born from darkness, he still instinctively felt warmth in his heart. Yun Shirshir was as warm as the sun. Gradually, he developed a fatal dependence on this kind of warmth. Therefore, he occupied this body and wanted to play the role of Yu and take all of Yun Shirshir's love. However, he had also heard it. He had truly heard it. Yun Shirshir missed the old Yu so much and hoped that he would return to her side. He found out from Gong Jie that Yun Shirshir was meeting with Gong Xiaoying, so he secretly came here. He did not tell anyone because he was worried. Thus, he secretly hid on the second floor and overheard their conversation. However, when he heard Yun Shirshir's true thoughts, he couldn't help but feel a little sad. Could it be that he wasn't needed? Yu couldn't help but doubt himself. She seemed to miss the old Yu. But what about him? Didn't she need him? Couldn't he replace him? Then what was the point of his existence? Yu clutched his heart and squatted down with a lonely expression, hugging himself helplessly. He also longed for warmth. He was also Yu. He was also a part of this life. Why was he not needed? Why was he so rejected? Chapter 4002. At the same time, something that Gong Xiaoying said reminded him of something. The first personality will never be killed. Was that really the case? Yu pondered over this sentence and felt a tinge of fear in his heart. The first personality would never be killed, but the second personality would disappear forever. He was the second personality. He could be killed by the first personality, disappear from this world forever. Yu furrowed his brows. There was a look of hesitation and conflict on his exquisite and handsome face. It was as if he had finally made up his mind. The corners of his lips curled into a cold arc. When Gong Jie and Yun Shirshir returned to the Mu residence, they didn't see Yu. They couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Xiaoyi Chen was taking an afternoon nap. Yun Shirshir shook him awake and asked him where Yu had gone. Xiaoyi Chen said, Isn't Yu at home? The two of them looked at each other. Yun Shirshir finally panicked. Why wasn't Yu at home? If he wasn't at home, where could he have gone? It had been more than a year since that incident. Yu had returned from Ashland Island. She still remembered that when he had just returned, he was extremely cold towards her and Wuxia. Yun Shirshir's heart ached for him because he had lost all his memories. That was why he had become so cold. However, she cherished what she had lost even more now that she had regained it. She patiently accompanied him and cared for him. In the end, Yu gradually stopped being estranged from her and was no longer so cold towards her. He gradually accepted both Wuxia and Chen and was willing to accept this family. At first, she was still worried that Yu would leave her secretly one night. However, even though Yu wasn't as innocent and adorable as before, he had gradually opened up to her. He had also started to like sticking to her. Yu usually wouldn't run around. Something must have happened. He had started to dote on her and wouldn't let her worry. How could such a Yu suddenly disappear without a word? Just as Yun Shirshir was extremely worried, Yu obediently returned home half an hour later. Mommy! Yun Shirshir was about to call Wuxia and ask him to hurry home to find Yu. Just as she picked up her cell phone, the door opened. She and Gong Jie turned their heads and stared at Yu as he slowly walked into the house. She was stunned for a moment, then immediately rushed over nervously and hugged him in her arms. Yu, where have you been? Yu couldn't help but yearn for her warm embrace. He hugged Yun Shirshir's shoulders and stroked her hair gently. I was bored at home, so I went out for a walk. His tone was extremely affectionate, but he sounded a little dazed as he spoke. He saw Yun Shirshir's nervousness, but he also felt a little lost. Was this worry real? Was this kind of warmth real? He was a little dazed. He didn't know if Yun Shirshir's worry was for him or for this body. The conversation she had with Gong Xiaoying earlier still rang in his ears. She had said that she was still waiting for Yu to return to her side. Yu, are you cold? Yun Shirshir's gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. It was snowing outside. Chapter 4003. Yun Shirshir's gentle voice interrupted his thoughts. It was snowing outside. She didn't know where he had gone or how far he had walked. Just thinking about it made her heart ache. Yun Shirshir touched his little hand. It was icy cold. Her heart ached as she held it and rubbed it for him. Mommy! Yu's lips curled into a smile as he turned to look at her. Yun Shirshir had never seen Yu smile so brightly and warmly. At least, she had never seen him smile so brightly since he had returned from Ashland Island. She caressed his cheek gently. What's the matter? Yu smiled and said, Mommy, if I had a wish list, would you fulfill all my wishes? Wish list? Yun Shirshir was a little surprised. You have a wish list? Yeah. Yu nodded and said, Yes, I have a lot of wishes. Mommy, are you willing to fulfill them? If Mommy can fulfill them, Mommy will definitely fulfill them. Yu's face broke into a rare smile. He pursed his lips and smiled shyly. However, he immediately regained his usual calm expression. Then you can't go back on your words. Yeah. When have I ever gone back on my words? Yun Shirshir said as she kissed his rosy cheeks. At night, Chen walked into the room and saw Yu sitting on the bed. He was holding a notebook and scribbling with a fountain pen. Yu was used to using a fountain pen. The most surprising thing was that he had never practiced writing with a fountain pen before. However, his handwriting with a fountain pen was especially delicate and beautiful. Chen didn't know what he was scribbling on. He looked over curiously. However, Yu sensitively closed the notebook and glanced at him warily. What are you doing? Looking. What are you drawing? I'm drawing you. Chen was pleasantly surprised. Really? As he spoke, he reached out to snatch the notebook from Yu's hand. However, Yu immediately dodged him. He picked up the notebook and slapped it hard on his forehead. Chen covered his forehead in pain and complained pitifully, Why did you hit me? How pretentious. Yu scoffed. Aren't you supposed to be able to take pain? Why are you groaning in pain? Chen was speechless. He crossed his arms angrily and asked angrily, "You secretly drew me. Can't I see how you drew it?" "I didn't ask you to look, so don't look." As Yu spoke, she turned around and flipped open her notepad. She held a fountain pen and started scribbling. Seeing that Xiaoqichen really didn't want to show it to him, Xiaoqichen didn't want to be snubbed. He lay down on the bed and played games on his phone. Yu glanced sideways and looked deeply at Xiaoqichen. Then, she quietly wrote on her notepad, "I want to celebrate my birthday with Xiaoqichen." "Here." Yu handed an exquisite notebook to Yun Shirshir. Yun Shirshir was a little surprised. "What's this?" "Yu's wish list." Yun Shirshir couldn't help but laugh. She originally thought that he was just joking about his wish list. She didn't expect him to really come up with a wish list. She flipped to the first page. On the title page, Yu had drawn a cartoon version of his family photo. His drawing skills were exquisite, and the cartoon version was very casual. Chapter 4004. On the first item of the wish list, Yu wrote, "I want mommy to give me a morning kiss every morning and a goodnight kiss every night before I go to bed." Yun Shirshir smiled, gently hugged the back of his neck, and gave him a kiss. "Mwah! Good morning, Yu." Yu pursed his lips and blushed. He stood on his tiptoes and kissed her gently on the cheek. "Good morning, mommy." Yun Shirshir immediately said, "Good boy. Mommy will give you a morning kiss and a goodnight kiss every day until you get married." "Okay. What's the second item?" Yun Shirshir looked down the list again. The second item was, "Say, I love you, to Yu." "Are all your wishes so simple?" Yun Shirshir muttered in her heart. This little guy was so easily contented. She hugged him and said, "Yu, mommy loves you. Mommy will always love you." When Yu heard this, the corners of his mouth finally broke into a warm smile. His heart was instantly filled with warmth. He snuggled up to Yun Shirshir and rested his head on her knee. He just stayed by her side quietly. He wanted time to stop here and never leave again. He wanted to hug her like this and never let go of her. This warm embrace was the most difficult thing for him to let go of. However, he knew. He was very clear about it. Time would not stop here, and it would not stop at this moment. Therefore, he cherished every minute and every second in front of him. His docility and dependence made Yun Shirshir feel tender affection for him. She hugged his back and slowly scanned through the wish list. 4. I want to build a snowman with mommy. 5. I want to celebrate Xiaoqichen's birthday with him. 6. I want to go to the amusement park with mommy and daddy. Gradually, Yun Shirshir's nose began to ache for some reason. The list of wishes in Yu's notebook was extremely simple, but almost every wish had something to do with her. At the same time, she felt an inexplicable sense of unease in her heart. This wish list actually made her feel a little heavy-hearted. It was as if Yu would leave her if she fulfilled all the wishes on the list. She didn't know why she had such a thought. However, in the face of such an abnormal Yu, she became very sensitive. In the past, Yu would never take the initiative to stick to her. It was a feeling of having nothing to fear. It was as if a person's life was so long that there would always be many opportunities to accomplish many things. However, this wish list made Yun Shirshir feel like Yu was saying goodbye to her. It was as though he didn't have much time left with her. Therefore, he wanted to use the limited time he had to fulfill all his unfulfilled wishes and leave with no regrets. She didn't know why she had such a feeling. However, when she saw at the end of the wish list, "Take a family photo," her heart skipped a beat. She felt an inexplicable heartache. "Yu, why do you have this wish list?" Yun Shirshir asked tentatively. "There are so many wishes. There's still a lot of time in the future. You don't have to rush to fulfill them now, right?" Actually, they couldn't be considered wishes, because this was something that she could easily do. For example, go to the amusement park, celebrate his birthday, or make a cake for him. For example, take a family photo. Chapter 4005. Yu buried his little face in her embrace as he mumbled this under his breath. "I want it. I want it." Yu raised his head. His domineering tone was no different from Muyaja's. Yun Shirshir was a little helpless, but she let him do as he pleased. "Okay, Then, when your daddy rests tomorrow, we'll take a family photo. Okay? Okay. At night, when Wuxia returned home, Yun Shirshir asked him to take 3 days off. Wuxia was a little surprised. What's the matter? Here. Yun Shirshir smiled and handed him a notebook. This is Yu Yu's wish list. Take a look. Wuxia took the notebook and glanced at it, a little surprised. Wish list? Why did he make this list? I don't know. This guy has been a little strange since he came back yesterday. But no matter how I asked, he wouldn't tell me. He only said these wishes and wants me to fulfill them. Wuxia was a little stunned. He also felt that Yu Yu was a little strange, but looking at these wishes, he could actually fulfill them easily. He didn't say anything and just nodded. I'll take tomorrow off. You're asking for 3 days? Yu Yu said that he wants to go to the amusement park and celebrate Xiao Yichen's birthday. You can't be absent. Wuxia smiled and said indulgently, Okay, I know. What else could be more important than his wife and son? Hence, the next day, Wuxia called Lu Jinyu and said that he wanted to take 3 days off. Although Wuxia was the chairman and CEO of Xingyu Financial Group, in the company, even if he was the one who set the rules, he himself was very strict with the rules. Just like the other employees, he would clock in and out and would never be absent from work, let alone be late and leave early. Originally, Wuxia had 7 days of annual leave to make up for. Lu Jinyu said that he got it, and for these few days he would be in charge of everything. Yun Shirshir had already contacted the photographer the night before, and she had also informed Gong Jie and Hua Jin. The photographer arrived very early and did makeup for Yun Shirshir and Lisa. Hua Jin was the last to arrive. When he heard about this, he specially took leave from the production team to rush over. Now everyone was here. Yu Yu was very satisfied. Because of his wish, so many people had cooperated with him. This made him feel incomparably warm. Yun Shirshir had only put on light makeup, while Lisa had only tied up her hair. She looked refreshed and did not put on any extra makeup. The background was sitting in the garden. The camera and light board were set up, and there was a bench in front of the flower bed. The men were standing and the women were sitting. Naturally, Yao was about to enter the scene as well. Yun Shirshir meticulously dressed her up. She put on a red blouse and a furry hat for her. However, the little princess was still drinking yogurt and was about to start filming when Gong Jie carried her away. Now, he was too big of a movement, and the yogurt spilled on the ground. When the little princess saw this, her heart ached. As a little foodie, when she saw the yogurt spilled, she immediately lost her temper. She was so angry that she kicked Gong Jie, leaving footprints all over him. Gong Jie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't do it on purpose. He immediately bent down to kiss her. Wah! Yao's face was full of disdain. She was so angry that she slapped his face. Chapter 4006. Gong Jie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't do it on purpose and immediately bent down to kiss her. Yao was so angry that she slapped his face. She slapped Gong Jie's face with her little paws. The group of people laughed and rushed forward to coax the little princess in a hurry. They fought to take the little princess into their arms. Even though Gong Jie was covered in black shoe prints from Yao's kicks, he could not bear to give the little princess to anyone else. This was especially so when Hua Jin came to pick her up. He rolled his eyes at him fiercely. Yu stood at the side and watched quietly. In the past, he was not used to such a noisy scene. He liked quiet, but after returning to the Mu family, not only did he get used to it, but he also integrated into such an environment. She felt that the family was only warm enough when they were quarreling. However, all of this didn't belong to him. Yu said softly in his heart, "Give me a few more days. Give me a few more days and I'll return everything that belongs to you." Yun Shirshir took Yao from Gong Jie's arms. After the little princess was coaxed, she stopped crying and stopped making a fuss. She quietly lay on Yun Shirshir's shoulder. Her dark eyes were still filled with tears, and her eyelashes were wet. It made her look pitiful. Yu walked over and stood beside Yun Shirshir. He looked up at Yao and suddenly smiled and opened his arms. "Brother, hug." Yao blinked. At first, she was reluctant and shrunk her neck. Yu smiled and reached out his fingers to gently pinch her cheeks and ruffle her hair. It turned out that there was a telepathic connection between siblings. Yueyao and Yu looked at each other for a long time. Suddenly, she stretched out her hands and opened her pink lips. "Big brother, carry me." When Yun Shirshir heard this, she realized that Yu was standing behind her and had been staring at Yueyao for a long time. She squatted down and Yu walked up to Yueyao and hugged her. Soon, Gong Jie also changed his clothes and went downstairs. Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja sat down. Yu hugged Yueyao and sat next to Yun Shirshir. Basically, family photos were taken every year. But last year, because Mu Yaja was too busy with work and Yun Shirshir took on a drama in the middle of the year, the two of them basically missed each other's free time, so they didn't have much free time. This time, it was just the right time to make up for it. The photos were taken on the spot and could be obtained immediately. One of them was enlarged, and the other was of normal size. They were placed in Yu's wish list. The so-called wish list was really simple and pure. For example, Yu wanted to celebrate Xiao Yichen's birthday with him. At the birthday party, he wanted to eat a cake personally made by Yun Shirshir. Yun Shirshir was worried about this. Although she would occasionally cook and bake, she would only stick to small cakes. She still felt a little guilty about making a proper birthday cake. Hence, the night before the birthday party, at 1 o'clock in the morning, she was still in the kitchen making the cake base. She had failed a few times before. It was either too hard or not fully cooked. It was because the proportions were not right. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the fresh cake base was finally out of the oven. Yun Shirshir also made fresh cream, strawberries, and jam. Chapter 4007. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the fresh cake was finally ready. Yun Shirshir whipped fresh cream, strawberries, and jam. In the middle of the night, Yu woke up and vaguely heard movement from the kitchen. He walked to the kitchen door in confusion, only to see Yun Shirshir using the back of a knife to smooth out the cream on the cake. He couldn't help but be mesmerized. Yun Shirshir was also immersed in making the cake, so she didn't notice the person standing at the door. Yu couldn't bear to disturb her, so he just watched as she smoothed out the cream, whipped the flowers, and embedded the slices of strawberries into the cake. He was about to go back to his room when he heard a surprised voice behind him. Yu. He turned around in surprise, only to see Yun Shirshir turn around and look in his direction. Knowing that she had been discovered, she stuck out her tongue in annoyance. "It's so late, aren't you going to sleep?" Yu said, "I'm going to pee." "Have you peed?" Yu said, "I forgot." Yun Shirshir was speechless. She couldn't help but laugh. Pinching his face, she said, "Hurry up and go pee. I want mommy to kiss me. Kiss me after you pee. Kiss me before I pee." Little Munchkin insisted and moved his face closer. She had no choice but to give him a peck on his rosy cheeks. Little Munchkin hurriedly moved the other side of his face closer. Full of anticipation, he hummed, "Here. Okay, it has to be symmetrical, right?" Yun Shirshir kissed him on the other cheek. Yu also kissed her and turned to walk to the bathroom. Yun Shirshir tilted her head and watched his back. She didn't know why, but Yu had been very intimate with her these few days. In the past, if she missed a goodnight kiss, he wouldn't deliberately go to her room to ask for one. Recently, Yu was indeed a little abnormal. However, this means that he has become more cheerful. Yun Shirshir comforted herself. She carefully placed the cake into the freezer and went back to her room to rest. The next day, there weren't many people at the birthday party. Gong Jie did not come, and Hua Jin was filming on set. It was a simple birthday party, and there were only 6 of them. But this was Yu's request. Since it was just a birthday party, he didn't want to make it a big deal. He wanted to make up for it because he hadn't had a birthday party with Xiao Yichen yet. They were twins born on the same day, but they didn't have the chance to celebrate their birthdays together, so they wanted to make up for it. When Yun Shirshir pushed out the birthday cake that she had stayed up all night to make, Xiao Yichen was pleasantly surprised. Yun Shirshir explained, "Yu said that he wanted to eat the birthday cake I made, but come to think of it, this is the most successful cake I've ever made. If Yu didn't want to eat it, I probably wouldn't have tried to make it myself." Xiao Yichen said with envy and jealousy, "It's all thanks to Yu. Otherwise, I don't know when I'll be able to taste Mommy's birthday cake." Wuxia also said seriously, in the family, only you and Yueyao have this privilege. The tone of their conversation is really sour. Yu muttered, they're jealous. Chapter 4008. All right, let's cut the cake. Yun Shirshir passed the knife to Yu and let Xiao Chen hold Yu's hand. Be careful, okay? She reminded him. Yu held the knife while Xiao Chen held his hand. They evenly divided the cake into 2 halves and then into 6 equal pieces. Yu took the first bite. The sweet and creamy taste complemented the refreshing taste of the strawberries. It tasted delicious and was comparable to the cake made by a cake shop. Although it did not have the skills of a top-notch cake maker, the fact that it was personally made by Yun Shirshir gave the birthday cake a special meaning. At night, Yu held onto his wish list and removed one of the items. Seeing that all his wishes were gradually being fulfilled and that only the amusement park item was left, he felt a sense of loss. In his dream, he woke up and realized that he was lying on the sea. Wave after wave hit his body, but he did not feel any pain. Yu stood up and saw that there was a black cage not far from the sea. A child in a white shirt was quietly curled up in the corner of the cage. He did not move at all. From afar, he looked like he was dead. He slowly stood up and walked toward the cage. When he stopped beside the cage, he raised his head and looked at the child curled up in the cage. He could not help but reach out to touch him. However, just as his fingertips were about to touch the child's exposed and empty arm, he retracted his hand. Yu pursed his lips and grabbed the edge of the cage expressionlessly. He exerted a little force and the cage instantly collapsed into ruins. This cage was the cage that imprisoned his first personality in his subconscious space. He was the only one who had the ability to open the cage. Now he had broken the cage. In the ruins, the child in the white shirt gradually opened his eyes. He looked like he had been in a deep sleep for a long time. The blood in his body was frozen and he did not stand up for a long time. He was cold. He had been asleep for too long. Because his second personality had been suppressed, he had been imprisoned for a long time. After sleeping for so long, her consciousness would gradually weaken. Even though she would never disappear, she would never be able to replace her second personality. Yu looked at the child in the cage and said calmly, "Are you awake?" The child in the cage opened his eyes. When he saw Yu standing in front of him, he narrowed his eyes in shock. "It's you? It's me." Yu coldly raised his eyes to meet his father's slightly dazed eyes. I tried my best. But..." He took a deep breath. "In the end, I can't replace you." In the endless black sea, the two Yu stared at each other. In this quiet space of consciousness, they met again. It was like a confrontation between an angel and a demon king. "Why are you here?" Yu, who was wearing a white shirt, sat up in the cage. His gaze toward him was inexplicably wary. "What do you want?" Yu curled his lips coldly and suddenly leaned over. He placed his arms on the side of his shoulders and looked down at him, examining him without restraint. The white shirt Yu was a little surprised by his actions. He froze and looked at him blankly. "What do you want?" Chapter 4009. He had been in a deep sleep for too long. Being trapped in such a space of consciousness and losing his own consciousness was no different from being dead. But now, his second personality had awakened. Yu stared at his face. "Don't you think it's unfair? Why is it that you are the first personality and I am the second personality that was born? You're the one who gave birth to me. Now I'm the one who's not needed. Why?" Yu's handsome brows gradually formed a layer of hostility, like a dark cloud hanging over his head. "It's not fair." Yu, who was dressed in a white shirt, smiled lightly and said nonchalantly, "There's no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. In the past, I've always thought that I'm the real first personality. So, I used all means to replace you. If the two personalities were labeled by color, one was white and the other was black. That time, Alice hypnotized Yu. The second personality took over, and the black version of him awakened from his ideology. He had always thought that he was the real first personality and that he had the absolute control. So, he wanted to destroy the other personality and return to the dominant position. But that time he realized he couldn't destroy the other Yu. He didn't know why, and he didn't know that the personality that couldn't be destroyed was the first personality. He still thought that he was the first personality and that this body originally belonged to him. He should take it back. Until he heard the conversation between Gong Xiaoying and Yun Shishir, he realized that the first personality could never be destroyed. It would only be sealed. Then, he confirmed that this body didn't belong to him. The Mu family wasn't his home either. Yun Shishir, Mu Yaja, Yueyao, Hua Jin. These people who had given him warmth didn't belong to him. They belonged to Yu. The reason why he received this warmth was because they treated him as Yu, as a substitute. He was an unwanted substitute. Then, he chose to give up. Otherwise, Mommy would be very sad. She wanted the old Yu to come back to her, so he might as well fulfill her wish. He was willing to give up everything just to let the real Yu return to Yun Shishir's side. He didn't deserve happiness. That was because he was born from darkness to begin with. Even if his heart was closer to sunlight, the child of darkness was not qualified to receive sunlight. Yu smiled and abruptly clasped his brother's shoulder, swapping their positions. At that time, Yu had already been swapped. "You, what are you doing?" Yu, who was wearing a black shirt, slowly closed his eyes. He gripped his brother's wrist tightly and led his hand to the handle. Then, he clasped his brother's hand and strangled his own throat. Yu, who was in a white shirt, looked shocked. "Don't you want to go back to Mommy?" Yu smiled coldly and tightened his grip on his wrist. "Kill me, then you can go back to her." Yu, who was in a white shirt, was stunned. The two of them were in a stalemate, maintaining this position. "I'm only giving you one chance now." Chapter 40:10. "Before I regret it," Yu whispered into his ear. His low voice was even more depressing than the dark sea. "Kill me." "Why? Don't you want to kill me?" He found it strange. If it were him, he would not hesitate to completely wipe out the second personality so that it would no longer threaten his position. Why was he hesitating? He even asked him why. Yu's lips curved into a smile. His calm expression, coupled with his white shirt, was as bright and dazzling as the morning sun. "Do you know? If I wanted to kill you, I would have had the ability to do so back then. But I had no choice because I am different from you. I am the first personality. I will not die, but you will. You are another me, and I am another you. This life is made up of us equally. But I have been occupying this body for so many years." Yu sucked in a deep breath of cold air as he held his aching forehead. "I'm sorry. All these years, I've taken Mommy's love for granted. I've taken all their love for granted, leaving you with nothing but hatred and killing." When he was young, those dark memories eventually formed the second personality. At that time, the personality had just taken shape and Yu wanted to suppress him. He did not know that he had dual personality. But in his subconscious, he could see the other personality clearly. Sometimes it was in his dreams. Sometimes it was in real life. He was worried that the second personality would gradually take over him and even hurt his family. He had never thought that the second personality was also a part of life and that it also craved warmth. He had always defined this personality as evil and had been suppressing it. No matter how he resisted, Yu would not give him a chance to take over his body. Hence, all the happiness in the past 8 years had nothing to do with him. He had taken over all the good things and left the darkness and pain to him. The second personality, Yu, was born in pain and oppression. But from the beginning to the end, he lived in a world of oppression. He also wanted to experience what light was, what happiness was. Hence, when Alice hypnotized Yu, the first personality was hypnotized and the second personality finally broke through the cage and sealed the first personality. But at that time, Yu did not resist. Instead, he chose to sleep. He wanted the second personality to be free, even if he could not return to Yun Shishir. Yu's pupils constricted. The dark fog in his eyes became more intense. "Yu, I also want you to experience what it is like to be family. So I am willing to sleep. I just pass the warmth that belongs to you. Yu, who was wearing a white shirt, suddenly hugged him tightly as he furrowed his brows in guilt. Chapter 40:11. Yu said in a low voice, "We can coexist." Coexist? Yu scoffed as if he had heard the funniest joke. We've coexisted for so many years, but we can't get along well at all. Instead of coexisting unfairly, it's better to destroy each other. I'm willing to share my warmth with you. Yu said seriously. I'm willing to share the love of mommy, daddy, brother, uncle, and all the family members. I don't want to. Yu was extremely stubborn. It's either I have it all to myself or I can't have it. As he spoke, he held Yu's hand and pulled it to his neck again. Kill me. Give me freedom. As he said that, he curled his lips. I'm not needed at all. As soon as he said that, he couldn't hold back his tears anymore, and they fell from the corners of his eyes. She wants you. Not me. Yun Shirshir hoped that the original Yu would return to her side. Since she hoped so fervently, he might as well fulfill her wish and return the original kind, cute, innocent Yu to her side. And he had always been used as a replacement. He was needed because of his existence. That was why Yu was still alive. Yun Shirshir had always been waiting for Yu to return to her side, but not for him. It wasn't that he didn't try. He tried hard to be like Yu, trying hard to force a smile, trying hard to bring them warmth. However, he couldn't do it. After all, they were two different personalities. He couldn't do it and he couldn't replace him. Hence, he was willing to give up this position. Yu grabbed his wrist tightly and said in a low voice, "Mommy needs you. Go back to her side. Okay?" His tone was inexplicably gentler. When he looked at Yu, his gaze was no longer as hateful as when he used to look at Yu. Yu had grown a lot in the past year. Yun Shirshir made him understand that in addition to hatred and darkness, there was also light and happiness in life. Life was very cruel. He recognized this cruelty, hated it, and viewed it with enmity. But Yu was the only one who still loved life bravely after deeply understanding the cruelty of life. He was the real hero. He was the only one who had the right to take control of life. I'm not Yu, I'm Gong Fan. Gong Fan smiled. The real Yu is you. Kill me. He held his hand tightly, giving him strength. His dark and turbid eyes instantly became clear. Kill me and I'll give you back your freedom. A strong gust. His snow-white shirt was slightly wrinkled from the wind. Yu stared blankly at the child lying beneath him, calmly facing destruction. He gradually lost control of his hands, as if they were being controlled by his consciousness. His hands were strangling his neck and accumulating strength. Gradually, Gong Fan felt that the pressure on his throat was getting more and more suffocating. His face turned red, and then the color gradually faded. He frowned and said hoarsely, "I don't regret it," he murmured and closed his eyes. At that moment, Yun Shirshir's gentle smile and the scenes of them spending time together flashed past his eyes like a merry-go-round. It wasn't that he didn't want to leave. It was just that this reluctance was accompanied by a fatal suffocation, and that illusory consciousness gradually dissipated. Chapter 40:12. Ah! Xiao Yichen was drenched in cold sweat as he sat up from the bed in shock. He had a dream. In his dream, he saw two Yu. One was wearing a white shirt and the other was wearing a black shirt. The Yu in the black shirt was lying flat on the surface of the sea. He was holding on to the other Yu's wrist and forcing him to kill him. Yu! He turned around and looked at the other side of the bed. He didn't know when, but there was an empty space on the other side of the bed. Yu? Xiao Yichen immediately got out of bed. He shuffled his slippers in a panic and opened the door. However, he didn't see Yu. He felt inexplicably uneasy, and it wasn't just because of the dream. The telepathy between the twins made him realize that Yu was in danger. Yu? Xiao Yichen walked to the balcony. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, he saw a lonely figure sitting on a swing by the flower bed in the back garden. Yu sat on the swing with his head lowered. The morning sun shone on his body, giving him a golden glow. Xiao Yichen heaved a sigh of relief. He opened the door and walked into the back garden. When he got close to Yu Yu, he slowly reached out and gently placed his hand on Yu Yu's shoulder. Yu Yu lowered his head. He didn't respond. Xiao Chen couldn't help but feel a little worried. You slept so late last night. Why are you up so early? Xiao Chen didn't mention his dream. He thought that Yu Yu was too sensitive. It was just a nightmare. How could he make so many connections? Yu Yu finally raised his head and opened his eyes. He looked at Yu Yu with his clear eyes. His gaze was as clear as spring water, without a trace of impurity. He couldn't help but be stunned. His pupils contracted violently. Brother. Yu Yu took a deep breath of fresh air and said calmly, I'm back. Yu Yu. Xiao Chen was stunned. Although the Yu Yu in front of him still had the same facial features, his aura was completely different. Yu Yu. Xiao Chen was so surprised that he cried tears of joy. You're finally back. He was so emotional that he pounced on him and hugged him tightly. I thought you would never come back. Yu Yu, who was hugged by his older brother, was stunned for a long time before a helpless expression appeared on his face. This guy, Yu. However, it gave him a taste of warmth that he hadn't felt for a long time. Yu Chen was hugged him. Yu. Drip. His tears. Tour. Yu couldn't help but laugh. Yu was so emotional that he started to cry. Was he that emotional to see Yu again? Yu ruffled Yu's hair. Yu did not realize that this action made Yu look like an older brother. Xiao Chen hugged Yu tightly and said, Since you're back, don't leave again. Yu laughed. Do you wish that I didn't come back? No, I don't think so. I think that's what you're thinking. Xiao Chen's face turned red. No. Yu knew that Yu was joking, but he didn't want him to make such a joke. Yu rebuked him. He patted his head and snorted. Did you take good care of mommy and sister when I wasn't around? Chapter 40:13. Yu rebuked him. She patted his head and snorted. Did you take good care of mommy and little sister when I wasn't around? Of course. Whether you were around or not, I would take good care of mommy and Yueyao. Xiao Chen suddenly thought of something and his expression froze. He hesitated for a moment and asked tentatively, Yu, now that you're back, you won't leave us again, right? Yu shook her head calmly. I won't. Really? For some reason, Xiao Chen didn't feel happy when he heard this reply. He looked around and hesitated. He wanted to say something, but he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Yu laughed and said, What do you want to ask? Just ask. You don't have to be so secretive. You're back. Then, what about him? Xiao Chen looked a little conflicted. Although he only used the word him, Yu knew who Xiao Chen was referring to. He raised his eyebrows and asked, Do you want him to come back? If he comes back, are you going to leave us again? Yu didn't answer. Instead, there was a dead silence. It was like a silent choice question. Yu sat on the swing. She tapped her toes on the ground and swung gently. Xiao Chen stood quietly at the side with a complicated expression. He didn't understand why he felt so lonely when Yu wasn't around anymore. It was as if his life had suddenly lost something, and his heart had become empty. Yu said calmly, Do you know about dissociative identity disorder? Yes, I know. Mommy mentioned it to me before. You've always had two personalities, right? One is you and the other is Gong Fan. I have two personalities. For a long time I was in a deep sleep. I thought that I would be in a deep sleep forever, but he woke me up. Yu's voice was as soft as a breeze. He said that whether it's mommy, daddy, Yueyao, or you, the one they need is me, not him. He wasn't needed, so he decided to leave. Leave. Xiao Chen didn't understand the meaning of the word leave. Leave for a short while? Or leave permanently? He would never come back. Once he left, he won't come back. Then, Xiao Chen felt especially bad. He looked at Yu and asked, Yu asked, Do you want him to stay? I hope both of you will stay. What if only one can stay? Little Chen suddenly stopped talking. He lowered his head in desolation and sighed. I don't have the right to decide this. It was too cruel. No matter which personality Yu was, he was still his younger brother. One gave him warmth. The other made his heart ache. Actually, he didn't hate the other Yu, although he gave off a very cold feeling. When one peeled off his cold exterior, his heart was very gentle. If only one could stay. Such a multiple-choice question was too cruel. However, as his uncle had said, if the two personalities couldn't merge into one, it would be the cruelest thing for Yu. If only one could stay, Xiao Chen didn't want to make the cruel choice. Chapter 40:14. Yu did not answer him directly. Instead, he lowered his head and seemed to be thinking about something. Xiao Chen immediately said, "Don't misunderstand me. I just can't bear for him to leave. I don't mean anything else." Okay. Yu nodded silently and said honestly, "I don't want him to leave either." When Xiao Chen heard this, his heart ached. He walked to the swing at the side and slowly sat down. Holding the swing, he fell into a daze. After a long silence, Xiao Chen asked hesitantly, "What is that world like? What was the world that little Gong Fan was in like?" After all, he was just an ordinary child. It was difficult for him to understand what the world of dual personality disorder was like. He felt very curious. "When I was young, I felt that I wasn't the only one in this body. Yu was rare and precious. He had opened the door to Xiao Chen's heart. It was also the most important door. In the past, he had never opened it to Xiao Chen. Not to mention Xiao Chen, he had never opened it to anyone. This was because he felt that he was an anomaly. He was an abnormal child. He did not want anyone to know that he was abnormal, especially Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen was too dazzling. From the day he was born, Xiao Chen was destined to be better than him. At least his healthy body made him envious. He did not have to stay in a place filled with disinfectant. He did not have to watch other people's children run and jump normally and play happily. He should be very happy, right? Xiao Chen had the most sunny smile. When he smiled, his dimples were extremely cute. Most importantly, Xiao Chen was very real. He was so real that he was transparent. At least when he smiled, he was really smiling because he was happy and not because he was forcing it. At the most innocent age of children, Yu already understood when to laugh and when to cry. Sometimes, even when he was in a bad mood, he had to force a smile. Especially when he watched Yun Na and Li Qin bully him. He felt so wronged, but in order not to let his mother worry, he forced a smile and said that it did not hurt, that he was not afraid, and that it was fine. He did not know when it started, but another Yu lived in his body. Yu had always thought that this Yu was an invader. Hence, he had been suppressing him. He had never been to his world because he had never known that Yu had another world. The feeling of having two personalities living in the same body was very strange. Our memories are interconnected. When he was in this body, I didn't know anything. And when I was in this body to be Yu, he didn't know anything. So, Yu uses lips suddenly too. Therefore, I only found out later that he threw Yun Na and Li Qin into the sea. I don't know everything. I just have a vague feeling that it must have something to do with him. Xiao Chen was stunned. He doesn't know what's wrong and what's right. He only knows that if he doesn't like something, he will kill it. If he likes something, he will protect it with all his heart. Yu's lips curved slightly and he suddenly smiled. But there's one thing that's the same between us. He also loves mommy deeply. Chapter 40:15. When I was 6 years old, I had my first interaction with him. Interaction? Yu nodded. It's not the kind of face-to-face interaction that you think it is. It's a very vague type of mental communication. What was it like? When I was asleep, I would dream of him and see the world that he was in. Actually, the world that he was in was the same as mine. He lived in the same house and had the exact same furnishings as my house. However, I don't know why, but it was always dark outside the window and the clouds were dense. I never saw the sun in his world. Yu paused for a moment and suddenly became serious. From then on, I started to suspect that I had a second personality. I read some relevant information. Xiao Chen furrowed his brows. I noticed that you were very different. In front of mommy, you were always innocent and cute. However, in front of me, Daddy and Li Hanlin, you were completely different. Was that also you? Yu closed his eyes and answered honestly, that wasn't me. Xiao Yichen suddenly muttered. Then, you were always cold in front of me. That wasn't you too? Sometimes it was me. Were you the one who said that to me? Sometimes it was me. Sometimes it wasn't. That means… Xiao Yichen clutched his chest and suddenly felt a pang in his heart. Regardless of whether it was Yu's first personality or Yu's second personality, in any case. Did they all despise him? His heart ached. Yu laughed and patted his head. Because when I met you, I couldn't control him anymore. In fact, I felt that he was a very talented personality. Why do you say that? In the business world, he was definitely a genius. Back then, those toy designs were indeed drawn by me. It was just purely out of interest. However, one time he ran out and looked at my designs. Then, he handed them over to a company. Even I didn't know about this. I think he would have come out a long time ago, but I can't interfere with his memories, so I don't know his memories when he was in this body, so I thought he didn't come out. Little Li Chen was stunned to hear that. In other words, he doesn't know what you did and what happened when you were in this body, right? Yes. Then you don't know what happened to him as this body. I don't know. However, maybe it's because of the main personality. If it's something that's particularly emotional, I'll know a little bit. Xiao Yichen furrowed his brows and reorganized his thoughts. I understand. He was the one who created the glory of Leji Holdings and came up with the Heavenly Eye plan, right? Yes. Yu nodded. Sometimes he and I would take turns and we would swap places very quickly. Perhaps in the blink of an eye we would have swapped places. Therefore, my memories are always different. What kind of difference? Yu recalled and said, I remember one time when I went to school to study. I clearly remember that I had just left the house in the morning. But when I opened my eyes, Mommy was already standing in front of me. When I looked at the sky, it was already evening. Chapter 40:16. Yu turned around and said seriously, in other words, he appeared after I left the house in the morning. When I returned to this body, it was already evening after school. The memory in between is no longer there, and my memory is still stuck in the morning. In the blink of an eye, it was already evening. As for what happened in between, I have no idea at all. Then, I felt very tired and exhausted. I wanted to sleep. Sometimes, when the personalities switched, my heart would be overloaded. I would feel very uncomfortable. Xiao Yichen suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Just imagining this scene was enough to make him feel terrified. Losing one's memory was the scariest thing. One of the reasons why humans were stronger than other animals was because of their memory. Whether it was studying or working, memory was an indispensable part. For example, as loyal as a dog, even if its owner mistreated it, it would mostly forget this memory. However, humans would not. They would always remember it. It would be engraved in their bones. Once they lost their memory, they would not be able to do anything. Moreover, it would be especially painful. When the personalities switched and the memories were not connected, life would become fragmented and especially painful. It was no wonder that Alice said that Yu's body could not bear the burden of two personalities. This was because the alternation of two personalities was an extremely painful thing in itself. Yu sucked in a deep breath of cold air and said faintly, when I found out that this memory partition was caused by the alternation of his and my personalities, I could no longer suppress that situation. In fact, if I could have gotten treatment at that time, perhaps it would not have been so serious. Perhaps it was because I kept suppressing him, so… He held his forehead with a headache. He seemed to be very rebellious. The more I tried to control him, the more rebellious and unreasonable he became. He wanted to control me instead. He even thought that he was the first personality. Xiao Yichen said, in fact, I used to think that you were very scary, because you were like a little angel in front of Mommy, but in front of me you were so cold, unfamiliar, and sharp-tongued. However, if I think about it carefully, you were not you at that time. You were just another Yu who ran out. However, he did not hurt anyone. Be it Li Qin or Yun Na, if I were in their shoes, I would deal with them too. It's just that, perhaps his way of doing things is rather extreme, but that doesn't mean that he is evil. Yu nodded and said honestly, yes, I'm relieved now. I don't think he is evil anymore. Xiao Yichen suddenly asked, Yu, do you believe in telepathy between Geminis? Yu was a little surprised to hear this. You seem to have mentioned this to me before. Yes, before I met you. I didn't know of your existence, but I would often dream of you. In the dream, I took your point of view. I felt that it was a little unbelievable, but those scenes were too real, so real that it was unbelievable. In this world, there are many things that can't be explained clearly by science as we know it. Xiao Yichen smiled as well. Chapter 40:17. Yes, I've mentioned to Daddy that I've always dreamed of you, but he didn't really believe me. At that time, he didn't know that you were still alive. It was only later that Daddy told me that you were weak when we were born. When the assistant arrived, you were already not breathing. They only took me away, but they didn't expect you to still be alive. Yu only lowered his head and didn't say anything. Xiao Yichen suddenly asked worriedly, Then, has he really left? Yu did not say a word. Instead, he sucked in a deep breath of cold air and looked up at his father. His clear and limpid eyes gradually became clouded with gloominess. They kept churning, looking demonic yet frightening. He didn't say anything. Just by sitting on the swing, he emitted an aura that made Xiao Yichen feel inexplicably apprehensive. It's him? Yu didn't say anything, but his invisible aura made Xiao Yichen realize that the person in front of him wasn't the angel Yu, but the little devil Gong Fan. You seem to want me to leave. Gong Fan spoke. His tone made Xiao Yichen even more certain that Gong Fan hadn't left. Xiao Yichen was pleasantly surprised. He didn't know how to hide it, so this surprise jumped out from his eyes. You're still here, Gong Fan. You didn't leave. He was so excited that he hugged Gong Fan tightly. I really thought you left. You didn't leave. That's great. Gong Fan was so shocked that his eyes widened. He didn't expect Xiao Yichen to be so excited when he saw that he was still in this body. He could even imagine how lonely and disappointed Xiao Yichen would be when he saw that he hadn't left. But he didn't expect. Xiao Yichen hugged him tightly, but he felt a little awkward. He pushed him slightly, and his expression was unnatural and awkward. What are you doing? I'm just very happy. Xiao Yichen also realized that he had been too agitated. He immediately retracted his hand and adjusted his collar, feeling a little embarrassed. Gong Fan stared at him coldly, but his chest was inexplicably hot, as if he had been scalded by magma. Happy? He snorted. What's there to be happy about? Don't you feel unhappy that I didn't leave and took over this body? Xiao Yichen laughed. Why would I? No matter if it's you or him, you're both my younger brothers. I like both of you and I can't bear to let either of you go. You and him are the same. Gong Fan's eyelashes suddenly flickered, but he did not say anything. He turned his face away and heard Xiao Yichen say in surprise, But it was you just now. Why is it suddenly you? He's tired. At the mention of you, Gong Fan's eyes softened and were no longer filled with hostility. Tired? Yes. Gong Fan said calmly. He has been sleeping for too long and hasn't gotten used to this body yet. So, he did not know how to explain this process. Xiao Yichen seemed to have sorted out his thoughts. Could it be that the two personalities, Yu and Gong Fan, had reached some kind of tacit understanding? Every personality needed to rest. Then, when this personality was resting, the other personality would come out and take over this body as Yun Tian Yu. When Yu rested, Gong Fan would come out. When Gong Fan was tired, Yu would return to this body. Chapter 40:18. If Yu rested, then Gong Fan would come out. If Gong Fan was tired, then Yu would return to this body? That should be the way to interpret it. Xiao Yichen did not probe further. It seemed that Gong Fan was in a bad state. He leaned against the swing, lowered his head, and said to Xiao Yichen, Let me be alone for a while. Although Xiao Yichen was a little worried, he knew that since Yu had appeared, it seemed that the two personalities had reached a consensus. That was good too. Since he had woken up from a nightmare, he was a little sleepy, so he went back to his room to rest. When he woke up in the afternoon, he changed into his home clothes and went to the living room. However, he saw Yun Shirshir standing in the living room in a daze, staring at the tightly shut door of the dining room. She was also in a daze. At the same time, there was a strange expression on her face. Her eyes flickered as if some emotions were brewing. Xiao Yichen walked to her side and gently tugged at her sleeve. He asked softly, "Mommy, what's wrong?" Yun Shirshir finally reacted. She lowered her head and looked at Xiao Yichen. After a while, she regained her senses. "Who's in the kitchen?" I don't know either." Little Yichen thought about it for a while and then asked tentatively, "Don't tell me. It's you? You?" Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows, her eyes throbbing a little more. Why is he in the kitchen? In fact, Yun Shirshir knew very well that Gongfan's personality, Yu, knew nothing about cooking. He did not even know how to peel potatoes, let alone how to cook. However, there was indeed someone in the kitchen. If it was Yu, then it meant that he was back. However, when Yun Shirshir realized that Yu was in the kitchen, she had already been in a daze for more than 10 minutes. She knew that Yu was in there, but she did not dare to confirm it. What if she was a nanny? Sometimes Wuxia would order the nanny to cook for them, but it was not every day. She was worried that the housekeeper would be the one cooking and not Yu. That kind of disappointment was something she didn't dare to bear. She couldn't bear it. Xiao Yichen walked to the kitchen door and pushed it open. As expected, Yu was standing in front of the oven with gloves on. She carefully took out the handcuffed Orlin's wings. At that time, Yu had grown a lot taller and no longer needed to step on a small stool to cook. Yu put the tray aside and looked in the direction of the door. When she saw Xiao Yichen, she smiled gently and said, "You're finally up? Yu?" Just as Xiao Yichen said those two words, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Yun Shirshir felt her mind go blank. She walked to the door and saw Yu standing in front of the oven with gloves on. At that moment, tears welled up in her eyes. "You?" When Yu saw Yun Shirshir, he calmly took off his gloves and turned around. His face was full of tenderness. "Mommy, it's time to eat. Mommy." His tone alone made her feel a sense of warmth that she had not felt in a long time. It was him. It must be him. He, that little angel, the first ray of sunshine in her life, had finally returned to her side. "Yu?" Yun Shirshir pounced on Yu and pulled him into her embrace, hugging him tightly. Chapter 40:19. "It's you." She widened her eyes, wanting to see the child in front of her more clearly. She hurriedly wiped the corners of her eyes and forced her tears back. However, she couldn't swallow the sobs in her voice. She hugged Yu so tightly, as if she was afraid that the next second, he would turn into a wisp of smoke and disappear from her sight. When Yu heard this, he sighed helplessly and gently stroked her silky hair. "Mommy is still such a crybaby." "Yu, is it really you?" Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and held back her sobs. "Mommy isn't dreaming, right?" Yu looked at her lovingly. "Mommy, if you're still not awake, you can go back to bed and continue lying down. I'll wake you up when dinner is ready." When Yun Shirshir heard this, she couldn't stop crying. Based on this sentence alone, she was almost certain that the child in her arms wasn't Gongfan but Yu. Only Yu would speak to her in such a doting tone. Yun Shirshir was inexplicably touched. She hugged Yu tightly and was momentarily speechless. This was because when she opened her mouth, only broken sounds came out. She seemed to have experienced this feeling once before. She recalled that when she was young, one of Yun Na's younger sisters came to visit and took away her favorite doll without her permission. When she came back from school, she couldn't find the doll no matter how hard she tried. She thought that she had accidentally lost the doll until the little girl came to visit again. She watched as the child held the doll in her arms. Then, she realized that she hadn't accidentally lost the doll, but that the child had snatched it away. She didn't say anything at the scene. She waited until the child left before she was so upset that she started crying. Li Qin scolded her in front of Yun Na. After that, she found out that the little girl originally wanted Yun Na's doll. Naturally, Yun Na couldn't bear to part with it, so she stuffed the doll into her arms. After that, Yoon Shirshir was sad for a long time. It was only later, on her birthday, that Yoon Yeching secretly hid a gift box under her bed. That night, when Yoon Shirshir was about to go to bed, she found a note in the diary. On the note, Yoon Yeching had written that the gift was under the bed. It was only when she pulled the box out from under the bed that she realized that her father had secretly bought a doll behind Li Qin's back. This doll was identical to the one she had bought back then. Yoon Shirshir burst into tears as she hugged the doll that she had regained. It wasn't sadness, nor was it happiness. Instead, it was an indescribable emotion. It would not be an exaggeration to say that all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart. She felt the same way when she hugged Yu. Yu caressed Yoon Shirshir's face and gently wiped away her tears with her two small hands. However, her eyes turned red as well. "Mommy, I'm sorry for making you wait for so long." Just as he said this, his eyes turned even redder, but he was still smiling. It was just a smile, but his eyes narrowed slightly as tears welled up in them. Yoon Shirshir's tears could not stop flowing. No matter how hard he tried to wipe them away, they continued to flow like pearls from a broken necklace. Yoon Shirshir also wiped his tears for him. The mother-son pair wiped away their tears, crying and laughing at the same time. Xiao Chen stood at the side. He felt an indescribable envy, but he also felt gratified. Chapter 40-20. The mother and son wiped away their tears, crying and laughing at the same time. Xiao Chen stood by the side. He felt an indescribable sense of envy, but he also felt gratified. He was gratified because the mother and son were finally reunited. He was envious because no one could compare to the bond between his mother and Yu. Yu had always said that he relied on his mother. In fact, compared to him, Yoon Shirshir relied on him more. She was the one who brought him into this world, but he was the one who saved her. No matter what, he could not compare to Yu's position in Yoon Shirshir's heart. He knew very well that Yu meant a lot to his mother. Similarly, his mother meant a lot to Yu. However, he did not feel jealous. Xiao Chen did not disturb them. Instead, he quietly left the dining room and left the door ajar to give them more space. The most touching thing was a reunion after a long separation. Although the two of them could not say much, just hugging like this was more than 1,000 words. The door was left ajar. After Xiao Chen left, Yu finally spoke. "Mommy, don't cry. If you cry, I will feel sad." His heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. Yoon Shirshir pouted and complained to him coquettishly. "Mommy thought that I would never see you again. All this time, Mommy has been trying to think of a way. They all said that you have dissociative identity disorder and that your first personality was killed." Mommy didn't believe it. As she spoke, she choked on her sobs and could not continue speaking. Yu's heart ached even more. Back then, when he had chosen to hibernate, he had hesitated. He could not let go of his mother. However, he knew that he could no longer control his second personality. He also felt tired. Hence, for a moment, he had a selfish thought. He chose to hibernate, to rest. He was tired. But now, he regretted that decision. No matter what, nothing was more important than his mother. "Mommy, I was wrong." Yu lowered his head like a child who had done something wrong. He was sad and disappointed. "I've made you worry." Yoon Shirshir just hugged him without saying anything. It wasn't that she didn't want to speak, but she couldn't. Ever since she found out that Yu's personality had been killed, she had not been able to sleep properly for a long time. She had never understood what dual personality disorder was. Was it an illness or something else? Therefore, she and Wuxia seriously flipped through the relevant information. Only then did she understand what dual personality disorder was. There were only about 1,000 cases of dual personality disorder in the world. Yu was one of them. Furthermore, other than dual personality disorder, there was also multiple personality disorder. Multiple personality disorder, as the name suggested, was to split into many different personalities. Other than the main personality, some of the personalities could be a young girl, some could be a knowledgeable professor, and some could be an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Between so many personalities, their memories were not interconnected. The personalities were independent and did not interfere with each other. There was even a record of 24 personalities. Yu only had 2 personalities, but generally speaking, dual personalities were independent of each other and didn't know of each other's existence. However, Yu vaguely knew. Yun Shirshir remembered that a professor had analyzed that perhaps Yu's sixth sense was especially sensitive. Before this, Yu's main personality had vaguely sensed the existence of another him. Chapter 4021. Yun Shirshir remembered a professor's analysis that perhaps Yu's sixth sense was especially sensitive. Before this, Yu's main personality had vaguely sensed the existence of another him. However, the second personality did not know about the existence of the first personality. However, after being hypnotized by Alice, he created an illusory world. In this illusory world, the 2 personalities finally met. At that time, the second personality finally knew about the existence of the first personality. At that time, Gongfan's personality also understood that if he wanted to replace Yu, he had to become the main personality. However, he did not know that the first personality could not be killed. However, after Yu fell into a deep sleep, he, as Yu, replaced the main personality. Therefore, when he faced Yun Shirshir, especially when he accidentally discovered Yun Shirshir holding Yu's photos in a daze, he felt a little sorry for her. He felt as if he had done something unforgivable. It was as if he had destroyed something beautiful and pure. For such a long time, he carried an indelible sense of guilt. As his feelings for Yun Shirshir grew closer, this sense of guilt tortured him constantly. However, Yun Shirshir did not resent Gongfan at all. She deeply understood that whether it was Yu or Gongfan, they were part of this life. Gongfan's sins were not unforgivable. In the past, even if he was not the main personality, he had silently protected Yun Shirshir. After being hypnotized by Alice, although he had lost all his previous memories, his feelings for Yun Shirshir had formed an inseparable bond. Yun Shirshir did not favor anyone. However, at that time, she felt that Yu, whose smile was as beautiful as crystal, would probably never return to her side. That was why she felt uncontrollably sad. Now that she had regained what she had lost, how could she not be agitated? In her agitation, she only knew how to cry. Yu looked at Yun Shirshir, who kept crying, and felt sad. "Mommy, didn't I come back? Don't cry, okay?" Yun Shirshir nodded her head, but her tears continued to roll down her cheeks. The more Yu looked at her, the more heartbroken he felt. He took a deep breath and said in a trembling voice, "It's okay now, just cry." "What's wrong with crying?" Yu gently wiped away her tears and sighed again. "But if you cry too much, your eyes will definitely be swollen. It won't look good." When Yun Shirshir heard this, she could not help but laugh through her tears. "Do you still care about your looks?" Yun Shirshir sobbed as she put her arms around Yu's neck. "My Yu is back. How can I care about my swollen eyes?" She asked again, "Will you suddenly disappear again one day?" When Yu heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. "I will never disappear." "Really?" Yun Shirshir, on the other hand, was somewhat skeptical. Of course, she had heard Gong Xiaoying mention before that the dominant personality would never disappear. However, she was still a little nervous. She was worried that tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, or even the day after that, Yu would suddenly disappear and be replaced by Gongfan. Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Don't worry, Mommy. I won't leave you again. I definitely won't. Don't worry, okay?" Chapter 4022. Yun Shirshir nodded and suddenly thought of something. Her eyes narrowed and she asked tentatively, "Well, what about him?" "Huh? Previously, Alice said that your personality was killed. I always thought—" Yun Shirshir calmed herself down and said sadly, "I thought you would never come back, so—" "He is not dead. He is still here, but I don't know when he will come back." Yu continued, "But Mommy will definitely see him again." Yun Shirshir was relieved to hear this, but she was worried about something else. "You two coexist?" "Yes. But your body won't be able to hold on, right?" Yu Yu did not answer this question directly because even he did not know how long the two personalities could last. Mommy, you don't have to worry about this. Even if you do, you can't do anything. Yun Shirshir did not say anything else. Xingyu Financial Group. In the president's office, Mu Yaja was looking at his laptop, but his eyes were in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. He didn't know why, but since yesterday, his heart had been inexplicably uneasy. His cell phone suddenly rang. He picked it up and saw that it was Yun Shirshir. He was a little surprised. If there were no special circumstances, Yun Shirshir would not call him when he was working. Either she had encountered something troublesome, or he did not dare to think too much and asked nervously, "What's wrong, Shirshir? Are you coming back for lunch? What's wrong? What's the matter?" Under normal circumstances, he would eat at the company, but she suddenly asked him if he was coming home for lunch. He became more and more suspicious that something had happened. "Nothing much. If you are free, come back for lunch with me at noon. How about it?" Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. Hearing her brisk tone, his heart calmed down. "Okay, Madam invited me. How can I not reply?" "Humph. Did you peek at my script? Why are you speaking like an ancient person?" Mu Yaja gently curled the corner of his lips and said indifferently, "Ever since you accepted this role, you've been holding onto the script. Of course, your husband wants to see what kind of script has you so captivated." "I knew it." Yun Shirshir pouted and immediately said, "All right, I won't joke around anymore. Come back soon. Yu Yu has prepared a surprise for you." "Yu Yu? Shoo. You can't reveal confidential information." Yun Shirshir was probably worried that she would reveal too much, so she quickly hung up the phone. Mu Yaja put his phone away and closed his laptop. He immediately stood up and walked to the door, where he bumped into Lu Jinyu. Lu Jinyu was looking for him. "Boss, what are we eating for lunch today?" Mu Yaja glanced at him. "You can eat it yourself." Lu Jinyu sized him up suspiciously. "Why? Aren't you coming with me?" "No. Did you make an appointment with someone?" Lu Jinyu even pretended to sniff. "Hey, who did our boss make an appointment with for lunch? There's something fishy going on. I have to report it to sister-in-law." "Sure. I'll go home for lunch. You can report it to her." Lu Jinyu loved to snitch. Usually, he would tell Yun Shirshir where he went and who he was socializing with. What? Go home for lunch? This was unprecedented. Chapter 40-23. When Lu Jinyu heard this, he laughed wickedly. "Sister-in-law specially prepared lunch? I want one too. I'll go back with you." "Freeload? Let's meet face to face." "What?" Lu Jinyu muttered. "You don't have the spirit to share at all. If you say anything more, you'll lose your annual leave." "I wouldn't dare." Lu Jinyu immediately stood respectfully and hurriedly said, "Chief, let's go home and eat. Be careful on the road." With a wave of his handkerchief, Mu Yaja floated away. He drove home and parked the car in the garage. When he opened the door, he smelled a fragrant aroma. New Orleans roasted wings? His nose was sensitive and he could even smell what was being cooked in the afternoon. Yun Shirshir was standing in the dining room, setting the table. When she saw that he had returned, she immediately went up to him and happily wrapped her arms around his waist. Her tone was as gentle as it could be. "You're back." Her light tone sounded like she was in a good mood. Mu Yaja ruffled her hair and looked at her lovingly. "You seem to be in a good mood today. Is there anything worth celebrating?" "Of course there is." Yun Shirshir hugged him and rubbed against his chest coquettishly. Then, she turned around and said to the kitchen, "Yu, is it done?" "It's done." Mu Yaja looked in the direction of the voice and saw Yu walking out with a soup pot. When he saw Yu wearing an apron, he was surprised for a moment. This was because Mu Yaja's personality was extremely bad at cooking. He also didn't know how to do housework. However, he had inherited Mu Yaja's outstanding talent in military and business matters. Usually, when Shengyu encountered any difficult cases, he would be able to give advice and suggestions. However, when it came to housework, he was completely clueless. Only Yu Yu's personality was good at doing housework. Wuxia looked suspiciously at Yun Shirshir and then at Yu. Yu carried the soup pot to the table and then looked up at Wuxia with a gentle smile. "Daddy, let's eat." Oh. Wuxia became even more bewildered. His eyes widened in disbelief. "How can you cook?" He then looked at Yun Shirshir, only to see that Yun Shirshir was deliberately keeping him in suspense. But she didn't say anything. When Yu heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. "Mommy, didn't you tell Daddy about this?" "No, you can tell him yourself." As she said this, Yun Shirshir sat down at the table and looked at the table full of dishes that Yu had prepared. She was drooling. Yu frowned helplessly and looked at Wuxia. She cleared her throat awkwardly and said proudly, "What's the matter? Daddy doesn't seem to welcome me back?" If Wuxia still didn't understand what was going on, then he wouldn't be Wuxia. "It's you." Wuxia was extremely surprised. "You're back." Yu nodded and said calmly, "You don't welcome me back? Why are you acting so indifferent?" Wuxia didn't know why, but his body stiffened. He couldn't believe it and he was so agitated that his whole body started to tremble. "Come here." He bent down slightly until they were eye level. Then he gently opened his arms and said, "Come here." Yu pursed her lips and walked towards him. When she was in front of him, she put her hands behind her back bashfully, and her cheeks were strangely red. Chapter 40-24. Wuxia finally recognized him. The person standing in front of him wasn't Gong Fan, but Yu. That innocent, pure, adorable, and kind Yu. That considerate and gentle Yu. Wuxia felt as if he was about to suffocate. He was choking and choking. "Yu." He called out his name, but his voice was hoarse. Even though he hadn't seen him for so long, he didn't find him unfamiliar at all. It was as if the scene of Yu standing in front of him was still yesterday. "Daddy?" He sucked in a breath of cold air, opened his bright eyes again, and opened his trembling arms. Wuxia saw that his fingertips were trembling nervously. His heart ached even more as he looked at him. He went forward slightly and hugged him tightly. "You're back." He sighed emotionally with a bitter expression. Yu was touched when he heard this. While he was unconscious, tears flowed out of his eyes uncontrollably. He could hear how much Wuxia missed him. It had been so long. More than a year. He had been in a deep sleep. Daddy must have been waiting for him to come back. Just like Mommy. Xiaoyichen walked out of the corridor and happened to see this scene. He didn't know why, but he also felt extremely touched. He hid in a corner and secretly watched. After a while, he walked to Yun Shirshir's side and hugged her waist to watch this scene with her. The father and son didn't seem to be like the relationship between Yun Shirshir and Yu. They didn't talk much and didn't make much physical contact. They just hugged each other like this. However, for some reason, Yun Shirshir felt an inexplicable heartache for him. However, it also gave her a very warm feeling. This was the bond between Wuxia and Yu that couldn't be severed. In fact, it was different from Yun Shirshir. Wuxia was a man, and a man's emotional expression was not as rich as a woman's. Usually, he did not reveal his emotions and did not speak much. Sometimes, when Yun Shirshir missed Yu so much that she could not sleep well at night, Wuxia would comfort her and make it seem like it was an understatement. What was the truth? Wuxia's longing for Yu had never diminished. Hugging Yu, Wuxia let out a long sigh and said in a deep voice, "Yu, I miss you so much." These words made the boy's tears flow out of his eyes. He held back his tears, pursed his lips, and hugged his neck even tighter. "Daddy, I miss you too." Yu hugged him and said sadly and emotionally, "I miss you all the time." They had been looking forward to this moment of reunion for so long. Now that they were finally seeing each other again, Yu felt as if there was hot lava gathering in his chest and flowing against his blood to his head and limbs. When Yun Shirshir saw this scene, she felt as if her heart had been injected with countless things called warmth. She did not dare to disturb them, nor could she bear to disturb them. She just watched as they hugged each other. It was so quiet that even their breathing was very, very light. When Wuxia sat at the dining table with Yu in his arms and looked at the sumptuous spread on the table, He felt very emotional. It seems like it's been a long time since I've eaten Yu Yu's cooking. When he said this, Yu Yu found it strange and asked, "He doesn't know how to cook?" They knew very well who Yu Yu was referring to. Chapter 40:25. Little Yi Chen immediately replied, "No, I don't. He doesn't know how to cook or do any housework." He paused for a moment before he added, "But he is much smarter than Yu Yu." Also, when Yu Yu heard this, he lifted his eyes and looked at Xiao Yi Chen with a kind expression. With just one look, Xiao Yi Chen felt as though he had seen hell through his eyes. Xiao Yi Chen said, Yu Yu is still the cutest." Yu Yu finally stopped looking at him. He blinked his eyes gently and snorted. "At least you know what's good for you." Xiao Yi Chen laughed and immediately covered his face. However, he thought to himself, "Is this really not Gong Fan? Is this really the gentle and considerate Yu Yu? Why does he suddenly have a kind expression that only Gong Fan has?" It was so scary. When Yun Shirshir saw this, she couldn't help feeling a little cold. "Your expression just now was so scary." Xiao Yi Chen was so scared that he didn't even dare to eat his chicken wing. Xiao Yi Chen hugged his rice bowl and lowered his head to eat his rice. Wuxia was curious. "You don't know what kind of personality he has?" Yu Yu didn't seem to understand. Wuxia didn't know how to explain it. It was hard for him to put it into words. Yun Shirshir immediately explained on behalf of Wuxia. "What your daddy wants to ask is how he usually is and what he does. Don't you know?" Yu Yu shook his head. "I don't know. I only know that he must be a very cold child. However, since he is very gentle with mommy, I reserve the right to let him exist." When Xiao Yi Chen heard this, he suddenly felt a chill down his spine. Turned out that Yu Yu was the final boss. Gong Fan was so scary and terrifying. However, the only thing that determined his existence was Yu Yu, who was smiling as innocently as a little white flower. He was the real demon king hiding behind Gong Fan. "I haven't cooked in a long time. I don't know if my culinary skills are still as good as before." Yu Yu asked Yun Shirshir, "Mommy, does my cooking taste good?" "It's delicious. Don't you think it's delicious?" Yu Yu licked his lips and said worriedly, "My sense of taste seems to have lost its sensitivity." "Oh, yesterday. He ate too much bitter gourd, so his taste buds are a little off." Yu Yu was rather disgusted when he heard that. Why would he want to eat bitter gourd? "Because he played a game with me and lost," Xiao Yi Chen said proudly. The loser had to eat all the bitter gourd. Hence, he took all the bitter gourd. When he brushed his teeth at night, he said that he couldn't even taste the toothpaste. That's probably the reason. Yu Yu's eyes were filled with disdain. He didn't expect Gong Fan to have such a childish side. It was unimaginable. He had always thought that Gong Jie was the kind of child who was cold and serious and would never play with Xiao Yi Chen. Wuxia commented, "It's much better than before." Yun Shirshir said, "It must be because you haven't tasted Yu Yu's cooking for too long." "Who has been cooking for so long?" Yu Yu suddenly asked. Yun Shirshir and Xiao Yi Chen looked at each other and said awkwardly, "The nanny." Yu Yu was speechless. He had thought that mommy would cook for them herself. He didn't expect her to be so lazy. Chapter 40:26. After Yu Yu's return, the family finally regained some vitality. The so-called vitality was hard to describe with words. At least, Yun Shirshir was no longer suffering from insomnia and could finally sleep soundly at night. At night, Yu Yu was reading a book. He had the habit of reading, something that Gong Fan did not do. Xiao Yi Chen snuck into the room. Seeing that he was holding a book and reading with great interest, he did not have the heart to disturb him. Instead, he moved a chair and sat beside him. He rested his chin on his hand and looked at him quietly. Yu Yu saw him walk in from the corner of his eye. He thought that he was going to disturb his reading and pester him to play with him. However, he was a little surprised when he realized that he was just sitting there quietly and did not make any requests. He put down his book and looked at Xiao Yi Chen. He was a little surprised and asked, "What are you doing?" Xiao Yi Chen rested his chin on his hand lazily and looked at him. He said jealously, "Do you know what I envy the most about you?" Xiao Chen said honestly. No matter which personality it is, whether it's Gong Fan or you, your studies are top-notch. Why don't I have the talent for studying? Yu smiled when he heard this. No matter which personality it is, they are all smart. I envy you too. Oh! When Xiao Chen heard that Yu was envious of him, he asked eagerly, "What are you envious of?" "I envy your stupidity." Xiao Chen was confused. Huh? Stupidity? Yu said matter-of-factly. You know, fortune favors fools. Usually, those who are a little stupid don't think too much and don't worry too much. You see, the smarter the person, the more troubled they are. However, those fools and idiots are happy every day. I don't know what they are happy about. Xiao Chen was speechless. He thought that Yu was going to praise him. However, he was shot in the knee. So infuriating. Xiao Chen hugged his arms angrily and glared at Yu. I'm your brother. How can you bully me like this? Yu raised her eyebrows and did not say anything. Suddenly, she thought of something and asked curiously, Do you know the girl who sits next to me? Chinger? Yu racked her brains for a long time, but she could not remember her name. I think so. After Yu returned, he did not delay his studies and was now in the 4th grade. Today, when he went to class, the girl sitting next to him seemed to treat him differently. At first, she seemed to be very afraid of me, but I kept seeing the way she looked at me. It was a little special, but I couldn't describe it. It just felt weird. Yes, Chinger likes you. Xiao Chen smiled. In the past, when you weren't around and Gong Fan was you, he was known to be a cold prince in school. Prince? When Yu heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. Were all little girls nowadays so childish? How could she use the word prince to describe a boy? Yu asked curiously, what was Gong Fan like in school? He didn't like to talk much. No matter who he was to, he was cold and aloof. His grades were especially good. He was the kind who could easily get first place in school. Chapter 40:27. Yu was a little stunned. Were girls so precocious these days? She was already experiencing her first awakening of love. Then, what about you? Xiao Chen was a little surprised when he heard this. Yu, are you concerned about me? I'm so touched. Yu replied, just take it that you're concerned about me. Xiao Chen became proud. I play very well with the boys in school. You have a lot of brothers. Yes. Why? Yu raised his eyebrows. Why aren't you popular with the girls? I don't usually like to play with girls. Xiao Chen continued. Girls don't know how to play football or basketball. They can't even swing a tennis racket, so we can't play together. I see. Yu picked up his book again and started reading quietly. Xiao Chen yawned a few times and rubbed his eyes. He was sleepy, so he stood up and went back to his room to rest. Xiao Chen and Yu were in the same school and class. They sat in the same row, front and back. However, the two people's results were very different. Xiao Chen wasn't bad at his studies, but he didn't like to study. Yunshe wasn't strict in this aspect. To her, Xiao Chen and Yu were at the age when they were the least stressed. It wouldn't be too late for them to focus on their studies when they were in junior high school. They should play well in elementary school. Moreover, boys in elementary school were very energetic. She didn't want her two children to be bookworms who only knew how to study. Yu was different. He liked to read. Although Gong Fan wasn't as interested in books as Yu, he liked to read many reference books and foreign books. He also liked to read novels, mystery books, and suspense books. On the other hand, Xiao Chen was very playful. He played soccer, basketball, and especially tennis. His skills were top-notch. In this aspect, Yunshe was more indulgent. She even learned how to play tennis. When she had nothing to do, she would play with Xiao Chen. But in the end, it was embarrassing. She was an adult, but she couldn't play as well as Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen and Yu were quite popular in school. Don't look down on children nowadays. They are all very mature. Girls liked to watch idol dramas and began to read romance novels. They also had hazy fantasies about love. There were also two couples in Yu's class. However, Yu did not like to play with girls. During class that day, Yu came to class. Just as she was about to put her bag on the table, she found something in it. She took it out, and it turned out to be a box of Godivan chocolates. The quality of the chocolate was not low, and the price was not low either. A box only cost a few yuan, but it cost a few hundred yuan. The school he attended was the most famous elite school in the capital. Most of the children who studied here were born rich and had extraordinary family backgrounds. Their pocket money for a day was equivalent to a month's salary for an ordinary wage earner. It was natural for them to be able to afford such expensive chocolates. Yu stared at the chocolates in a daze. She wondered who had sneakily stuffed them into her desk. Her desk mate, Qing returned to her seat. When she saw the chocolates in Yu's hand, she blushed but did not say anything. She sat upright in her seat and took a book to cover her blushing face. Chapter 40:28. From the looks of it, this box of chocolates was a gift from Qing. However, he didn't eat chocolate. Xiao Chen, who was behind him, stuck his head out and smelled the aroma of chocolate. He moved closer to Yu and was a little surprised to see him holding a box of chocolates. "Wow, chocolate! Where did you get it?" Yu replied honestly, "I don't know. I don't know who gave it to me." "You don't know who gave it to you?" "Yeah. I saw it on my desk when I came this morning." "Oh?" Xiao Chen smiled and asked tentatively, "Can I eat it?" Yu smiled and said, "What if you gave it to the wrong person? Maybe it's not for me." Xiao Chen immediately said, "That's impossible. Since it's on your desk, it must be for you." With that said, he picked up a piece of chocolate and stuffed it into his mouth. The rich chocolate melted in his mouth and touched his snow-white teeth. Xiao Chen exclaimed that it was delicious. His exclamation attracted the attention of the others. When they heard that there was something delicious, the other students in the class who had arrived early also gathered around. When they saw Yu holding a box of chocolates, they were pleasantly surprised. Some had only seen it but not eaten it. Some had eaten it often. They heard a child say with a red face, "This chocolate is delicious. My mom bought a box last time and I finished it all in one night." "Really? It's delicious." "Yu, I want to eat it too." "Can I eat it?" "I want to eat it too." Yu was very generous. He placed the box on the table and said with a smile, "If you want to eat it, go ahead." In no time at all, the box of chocolates was quickly emptied. At this moment, Qing's expression changed. She looked at the classmates with dissatisfaction and asked Yu, "Aren't you going to eat it?" She was still a little angry as she said, "If you all finish the chocolates, what will Yu eat?" Xiao Chen didn't know what was going on. With his low EQ, he snorted and said, "You didn't give it to him. Why are you so agitated?" When Qing heard this, she felt even more embarrassed. She muttered, "How am I agitated? I saw that Yu didn't eat a single piece, so I felt wronged for him." The classmates looked at each other and smiled. "Yeah, Yu, aren't you going to eat?" Yu is too generous. He gave the chocolates to others but didn't get to eat any himself. The boy smiled faintly. "I don't like chocolate. It's fine as long as you think it's delicious." He didn't know how many people were mesmerized by his smile. Yu looked very good when he smiled. It was especially charming. He didn't smile as brightly as Xiao Chen. He only curved his lips slightly, revealing his white teeth. His delicate eyebrows relaxed and his eyes curved like crescent moons. It was especially beautiful. Although he was young, he still had a gentle temperament. Even Qing couldn't help but stare blankly at his exquisite side profile. She didn't regain her senses for a long time. Yu, you're smiling again. Yu looks really good when he smiles." The group of children looked as if they had discovered a new world. They pointed at Yu and made a big fuss. Yu, on the other hand, was scared out of his wits. Xiao Chen saw that he was in a daze and immediately explained, "You rarely smiled in the past, so of course they're making a fuss over nothing." Chapter 40:29. As he said this, he put his arm around Yu's shoulder and boasted to the others, "My brother looks good when he smiles. Don't crowd around here. It's almost time for the morning reading." As soon as he said this, a group of girls excitedly squeezed past Xiao Chen and started talking to Yu. You, smile again. You look especially charming when you smile. Smile again. Ching'er was a little uncomfortable. In fact, Yu had already guessed that she was the one who had given him this box of God-Ivan chocolates. She had saved up some pocket money and bought a gift box. She was the first to arrive in class and secretly stuffed the box of chocolates into her desk. In the end, Yu came and opened the box of chocolates. She secretly observed him, but still did not see any change in his expression. She thought that he did not like it. In the end, the group of people crowded around her. Before long, all the chocolates were snatched away. She could not help but feel a little angry. This box of chocolates was a gift from her to Yu. Even if he did not like them, they would be eaten by irrelevant people if they were to rot in his hands. Ching'er was a little angry. Yu also observed her expression but did not say anything. During the morning reading, Ching'er was still angry when Yu suddenly passed her a neatly cut note. She was a little surprised and pleasantly surprised. She took the note and saw a line of delicate and beautiful handwriting. "Thank you for the chocolates." Ching'er looked up in surprise and saw Yu looking at her sideways. He raised his eyebrows and blinked. It meant that he knew that this box of chocolates was from her. Ching'er did not know why, but she felt wronged and replied to him. "The chocolates are for you, but you didn't eat a single piece. I'm so angry." There was even an angry emoticon at the end. After a while, another note was passed over. It said, "I don't like chocolates, but isn't it good to share good food with everyone?" There was also a warm emoticon at the end. Ching'er finally mustered her courage and replied, "Can I talk to you?" Yu was a little surprised when she saw this. Had she not spoken to him even though they had been desk mates for so long? No wonder Ching'er felt a little jealous when she saw him smiling at the other students. It seemed that Gongfan usually did not talk to her. In fact, that was indeed the case. Ching'er had once mustered up the courage to talk to Gongfan, but in the end, she was blocked by Gongfan's cold gaze. He was so scared that he almost cried. After a while, Yu's note arrived. Sure. Happy face when Ching'er saw this. She smiled knowingly and carefully kept the note into the pencil case, as if she had found a treasure. This was the note that Yu had sent to her. It was also the first note that she had sent to him. Moreover, she could finally talk to the boy she liked. In the future, they should also become good friends, right? Ching'er liked Yu, and it was not a superficial kind of like. Instead, it was a form of worship and adoration. Yu had good grades and was good-looking. The teachers doted on him a lot, and all the students in the class liked him. However, Gongfan's personality was more cold. Other than Xiao Chen, no matter who it was, he was cold and indifferent. However, the other children all felt that this kind of personality was very cool, especially when Gongfan casually answered those questions that were enough to leave many students in a terrible state. Their admiration for him was even more evident in their words and expressions. Chapter 40-30. However, one day, Gongfan was no longer as cold as before. After Yu returned to school, he was no longer as cold as before. Gradually, some children mustered up the courage to talk to him. Although they were afraid that Yu would reject them or treat them coldly, they pretended not to see or hear him. In the end, the gentle Yu responded to them with a smile. This encouraged the children in the class, and they all went up to talk to him. Only Ching'er did not dare to. In the past, she had mustered up the courage to speak to Gongfan, but Gongfan did not even look at her in the eye. Ching'er became a little disappointed. She thought that Gongfan hated her. This time, Yu replied to her with a note, which encouraged her. When class was over, she sat in her seat, hesitating. The children in the class had run to the corridor to play. The field was downstairs. Some children took the opportunity to play games on the field after class. There were only a few people left in the classroom. Yu sat in his seat and was reading a mystery novel. Ching'er took a look and saw that the title of the book was in English. Although she had studied English for 3 years, she still found it difficult to understand. Yu looked very charming when he was reading. He lowered his head. The morning light seemed to have plated a layer of silver on his face. He was engrossed in reading. His fair jade-like fingers pinched the pages of the book and flipped a page from time to time. Qing'er looked around and finally mustered up the courage to speak. Yu, what book are you reading? Yu was pulled back from his thoughts by her voice. He returned to his senses and said calmly, Murder on the Orient Express. Wow, this book title sounds so scary. It's a mystery novel. I've read the translation before, but this is the original book. I plan to read it again. After a pause, Yu explained again, I like reading mystery novels. Mystery novels? Qing'er thought for a moment and immediately thought of it. Mystery novels? Are they the same as Detective Conan? Yes. I've also watched Detective Conan before. It's very good. That means that we all like the same things. I like to reason too. Qing'er wanted to get closer to Yu. Yu could tell that Qing'er was trying to get closer to him, but he did not say anything. Instead, he turned around and continued to focus on his novel. Qing'er saw that he was so absorbed in reading the novel, and she didn't have the heart to disturb him. But seeing that there was no one in the classroom, if she missed this gathering, perhaps the next opportunity to talk to him, she didn't know when would be. She finally gathered her courage and asked, Can we be friends? Yu frowned and smiled helplessly. Aren't we friends now? Because of this smile, Qing'er's heart skipped a beat and she lost her mind. She lowered her head shyly and said sheepishly, Are we considered friends? Yeah, I guess so. Yu smiled again and said, All the classmates in this class are my friends, aren't they? Qing'er's face froze when she heard this. She looked at Yu in a daze and felt a little disappointed. Her disappointment was so obvious that Yu couldn't help but ask, What's wrong with you? Why do you look like that? Chapter 40:31. Qing'er's face froze when she heard this. She looked at Yu in a daze and felt a little disappointed. Her disappointment was so obvious that Yu couldn't help but ask, What's the matter with you? Why do you look like that? I'm talking about friends. Not friends like this. Then what kind? I hope that my friendship with Yu is special. That is, she couldn't describe that feeling. Qing'er's words were a little clumsy, but in reality, she hoped that she could become Yu's most special friend. She hoped that they could share each other's secrets and that their friendship would be better than that of the other children in class. His only good friend, his best friend. But Qing'er couldn't bring herself to say it. But she blamed herself for being too greedy. She was already extremely lucky to be able to talk to Yu. Why did she have to ask for so much? In any case, she could talk to Yu now. Then, from now on, we're good friends, right? Yu replied with an and lowered his head to continue reading his novel. Qing'er didn't want to disturb Yu any further. She didn't want to annoy Yu, so she leaned on the table obediently. When Yu wasn't looking, she took out the piece of paper with Yu's handwriting and read it a few times. The more she read, the more she liked it. Yu's handwriting was so beautiful. He must have been practicing writing with a fountain pen since he was young. She had the habit of practicing writing when she was young, but she couldn't persevere. Even though she couldn't persevere, she still practiced for a long time. But now, her handwriting wasn't as beautiful as Yu's. After school, in the car, Chen saw Yu looking out of the window quietly. He nudged his elbow gently. Have you finished your homework? Yu glanced at him. Although it was just a glance, he knew what was on his mind. Do you want to copy it? Chen was instantly embarrassed. What do you mean by copying? It's just a reference. What's there to learn from the answer? Yu, don't be so cruel. Let me have a look. I want to see what kind of thoughts you have when doing the questions. You dozed off during class. It's obvious that you don't know how to do the questions. You're starting to get serious. Yu paused and glanced at him with disdain. But you're obviously using your serious energy in the wrong place. Chen pouted and started to play the tender card. Big brother loves you. Brother dotes on you. You're my favorite little brother. With that, Chen pouted and moved closer to Yu to kiss him. Yu slapped his face in disdain. Stay away from me. I'm allergic to idiots. Chen was stunned when he heard this. He said a name in a daze. Gong Fan. When Yu looked back, his gaze was no longer gentle. Instead, it was cold and indifferent. Xiao Chen was no stranger to him. What's wrong? Little Chen opened his mouth, wanting to cry out in alarm, but when he met his uncle's cold gaze, he swallowed it back down his throat. It's you? He pursed his lips and stopped talking. Gong Fan looked out of the window and glanced at Xiao Chen. He was a little confused. Where are we? In the car. What car? Chapter 4032. In the car. Gong Fan frowned but did not say anything. Xiao Chen explained, This is the car that's going home. We've already finished school. When Gong Fan heard this, he did not say anything else. Instead, he closed his eyes and rested. Xiao Chen did not dare to say anything. He curled up in a corner and shivered. How did this guy's personality change so quickly? Oh my god. It seemed that he could not speak ill of Gong Fan, while he was Yu Yu's personality. It just so happened that this guy had changed his personality. If Gong Fan heard it, he might not be able to bear the consequences. Fortunately, Xiao Chen was glad that he did not say anything bad about Gong Fan just now. The change of personality was an extremely short process. Perhaps in the blink of an eye, Gong Fan would replace Yu Yu's personality and take over this body. This process often happened in a very short period of time. Perhaps in the blink of an eye the personality changed. When they reached home, Yun Shirshir saw Yu Yu and greeted him warmly. However, she realized that the child in her arms had changed a little. He was no longer Yu Yu. Instead, he had become Gong Fan. Yun Shirshir was a little surprised, but she did not reveal it. She was worried that her reaction would be too abrupt and cause Gong Fan to misunderstand and think that she did not welcome his personality. Gong Fan was an extremely sensitive personality. Perhaps it was because of his inferiority complex, uneasiness, and unstable life that caused him to have a repressed state of mind. He had always thought that he was not welcome. Hence, when Yu Yu returned, this sensitive mood escalated. Before going to bed at night, Yun Shirshir told the two children a bedtime story as usual. Before leaving, when Yun Shirshir leaned over to give him a goodnight kiss, Gong Fan, who was wrapped in the blanket, finally asked uneasily, Mommy, will you not love me in the future? Yun Shirshir was not surprised that he would ask this, but she was surprised by his emotions. She had never felt so disappointed before. Yu Yu was back. From then on, he was no longer the most special one. The love that was supposed to be shared equally with Yueyao and Xiao Chen was now shared equally with Yu Yu. He felt that it was unfair, but there was nothing he could do. In fact, he even felt that Yu Yu was doing him a favor by keeping his personality. On one hand, he rejected this charity, but on the other hand, he longed for it. That time, in his sleep, he had awakened Yu Yu's personality and even used his will to induce Yu Yu's personality to kill him. However, just as he was about to suffocate, his tears began to flow. He began to feel uneasy, reluctant to part with her. He missed the warmth that Yun Shirshir gave him and the warmth that the Mu family gave him. Even if it was struggling at death's door, even if it had to wag its tail and beg for mercy, it still wanted to occupy a place in this body. He did not need too much warmth. Even if it was just a goodnight kiss, it would make him yearn for this world. In the end, he compromised. He compromised to his own greed. It was rare for him to put down his pride and reveal a humility that he had never shown before. Let me stay, okay? When Yu Yu heard this, her heart ached as she hugged him. At this point, the two personalities had merged and coexisted. Yu Yu knew that keeping Gong Fan's personality would definitely be a burden to his mental strength. His body was destined to be unable to bear it. Such a burden, when Gong Fan revealed his weak side, should be eliminated in one fell swoop, expelled from his body, and erased. Chapter 4033. Yu Yu knew that keeping Gong Fan's personality would definitely be a burden to his mental strength. His body was destined to be unable to bear it. When Gong Fan revealed his weak side, he should get rid of such a burden in one fell swoop, expel him from his body, and wipe him out. However, he still could not do it. Hence, Yu Yu and Gong Fan reached a consensus. The two personalities would take turns to appear and could not dominate each other for a long time. However, Gong Fan still felt uneasy. He was afraid that he would become a burden. He was afraid that Yun Shirshir would hate his existence. Mommy, will you hate me? Yun Shirshir felt strange when she heard this. Beside her, Xiaoyi Chen had already fallen asleep. Hence, she lowered her head and asked in a low voice, "Why are you asking such a strange question?" "Because I'm afraid that one day, Mommy will hate me." As Gong Fan said this, he felt a little sad and guilty. He felt that this body did not belong to him, but he was clinging to it and occupying it. He could not bear to disappear and leave. Could it be that Yun Shirshir did not love him at all and was just waiting for Yu to return? Now that Yu was back, Mommy should know about this, right? Then would she start to dislike him? Gong Fan felt uneasy. This was the only thing that made him feel uneasy. It seemed that nothing else could affect his emotions. Only things related to Yun Shirshir were the things that he cared about the most and could affect his emotions the most. Mommy, if one day you feel that I'm a hindrance, don't hate me. Tell me that you don't like me and that you prefer Yu. I will leave on my own accord. However, please leave him with his last dignity. Don't chase him away, don't hate him. Other than that, he had no other requests. Yun Shirshir's heart ached when she heard this. She did not know why Gong Fan would say such things. She had always known that what this child lacked the most was a sense of security. However, she did not expect him to be so sensitive that he would let his imagination run wild. However, what Gong Fan was worried about was also what she was worried about. She was worried that with the two personalities coexisting, Yu would not be able to hold on any longer. However, she did not blame Gong Fan. He wasn't the only one who was to blame. How could she blame him? However, she was also in a dilemma. Whether it was Gong Fan or Yu, she couldn't bear to part with them. But if she wanted to keep Gong Fan's personality for her own selfish reasons, what if Yu couldn't take it? If that happened, she would never be able to forgive herself. However, if he wanted to protect Yu, would he have to chase Gong Fan away? Was there no way to satisfy both sides? At least don't be so cruel. Don't overthink it. Why would Mommy hate you? Gong Fan said uneasily. If there comes a day when I have no choice but to disappear, I will definitely disappear obediently. Whether Mommy remembers me or not, loves me or misses me, I will always love Mommy the most. This sentence touched her deeply. Yun Shirshir hugged him tenderly and sighed. Don't let your imagination run wild. Mommy won't hate you or not love you. Whether it's you or Yu, both of you are Mommy's favorite. Mommy loves you and will always love you. Don't let your imagination run wild. Okay? Sleep early. When Gong Fan heard this, he fell asleep peacefully. Chapter 40-34. When Gong Fan heard this, he felt at ease because of her words. He closed his eyes and fell asleep peacefully. The next morning, Xiaoyi Chen was the first to wake up. After brushing his teeth and washing his face, he realized that Gong Fan had not woken up yet. Then he realized that Yu was more sleepy than before. He did not know if he should call him Yu or Gong Fan. However, he vaguely realized that Yu must still be sleeping, and that the person in this body must be Gong Fan. Yun Shirshir pushed open the door and saw that Yu was still sleeping. Hence, she instructed Xiaoyi Chen to wake him up. Xiaoyi Chen felt a little wronged. He pouted and said, Mommy, what if he is Gong Fan? Gong Fan has a terrible temper when he wakes up. He will throw a tantrum at me, but not at you. Why don't you wake him up? When Yun Shirshir heard this, she did not know whether to laugh or cry. Indeed, Gong Fan was indeed a little autistic and not easy to get along with. He was special to her, but to others he was extremely cold. Hence, Xiaoyi Chen was a little afraid. It was not that he was afraid, but when Gong Fan got angry, it was really quite scary. Yun Shirshir walked to the bed and gently pushed Yu. She said gently, Yu, wake up, wake up. Hearing her gentle voice, Yu's thick eyelashes fluttered slightly and he finally opened his dark eyes. His gaze was dazed for a moment. When he saw Yun Shirshir's face, he snuggled into her arms and buried his face in her chest. Like a kitten acting coquettishly, he rubbed against her. Mommy, good morning. Yun Shirshir gave him a morning kiss. When Xiaoyi Chen saw this, he was a little jealous. He paced around at the side and leaned forward to ask for a kiss. Mommy, I want a morning kiss too. Me too. Okay. Okay. I'll give you a morning kiss too. After Yun Shirshir gave Xiao Yichen a kiss, the latter was finally satisfied. After breakfast, the driver sent the two children to school. When they arrived at the classroom, Gong Fan sat in his seat. Qing'er, who was beside him, immediately greeted him with a smile. Morning, Yu. Gong Fan did not react at first. He did not even see that there was someone beside him. When he heard Qing'er greeting him, he pretended not to hear it. Qing'er felt a little different. However, she also noticed that the Yu today was different from the one yesterday. Indifferent just like before. However, didn't Yu already tell her yesterday that they were good friends? So, she could still talk to him. Was it because they were friends? Could it be because he wasn't feeling well? Thinking of this, Qing'er asked with concern, "Are you feeling unwell? Why do you look so pale?" Gong Fan still did not answer. For a moment, Qing'er felt a little uneasy. She didn't know why, but she felt that Yu had become like before. She couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Xiao Yichen, who was sitting in the back seat, looked at Gong Fan and then at Qing'er. He quickly said to Qing'er, "He's in a bad mood. Don't talk to him." He was being kind. When Qing'er heard this, she nodded silently. However, she felt even more upset. Of course, she didn't know that Yu had dissociative identity disorder. However, she secretly wondered if she had done something wrong to make Yu unhappy. Xiao Yichen saw it all. After class, when Qing'er wasn't around, he secretly tugged at the corner of Gong Fan's shirt. "Hey, do you feel that Qing'er likes you?" Chapter 40-35. He wasn't stupid or slow to react. He just didn't care about such things. When Xiao Yichen heard this, he quickly pulled him to the side. "Although there are a lot of girls in this class who like you, Qing'er has liked you for a long time since she became your desk mate in the 2nd grade. Gong Fan was still indifferent when he heard this. "So what? You don't have any feelings for her?" Xiao Yichen's face was full of gossip. However, Gong Fan was very unhappy with his question. "How old are you? What do you know about feelings? Do you understand?" Xiao Yichen shook his head numbly. "No girl likes me. Many girls like me. I'm puzzled. I'm so gentle to girls. Why don't any girls like me? Look at you. You're so reclusive and don't talk much. You look so cold and aloof. But there are so many girls who like you. Do girls nowadays like cool boys?" Gong Fan smiled and said slowly, "At least they like those with good grades." When Xiao Yichen heard this, he smiled awkwardly but politely. "Are all children nowadays so snobbish? Comparing grades and family background?" Gong Fan sneered. "That's why I find it boring." He was still in primary school. But then again, even if he was in high school or university, he wouldn't date. It wasn't that he was cold and didn't like girls. It was because he didn't know when he would disappear. What right did a personality that would disappear at any time have to talk about these things? Just existing in this world had exhausted almost all of his mental and physical strength. Xiao Yichen touched the bridge of his nose. "If you don't like her, it's better to make it clear. I feel that Qing'er treats you differently. Speaking of which, girls nowadays are so mature. It's really scary." Gong Fan turned to look at him and said angrily, "If she doesn't tell me, how can I reject her?" Xiao Yichen was stunned. "That's true." He thought for a while and suddenly said, "Why don't we pass a note?" As he spoke, he leaned over to Gong Fan's ear and whispered a few words. Before class started, Qing'er returned to her seat. Gong Fan glanced at her and secretly passed her a piece of paper. Qing'er was a little surprised. When she took the note in her hand, she saw that it was written by Gong Fan. However, the handwriting was slightly different from Yu's. Different personalities even had different handwriting. She was a little surprised. She took a closer look and saw a line of words on the note. "Do you like me?" Her heart skipped a beat and she almost suffocated. She was stumped by such a straightforward question. Could it be that Yu liked him? Thinking of this, she held the pen, but did not know how to reply. She raised her head again and stole a glance at Gong Fan, only to see him looking at the book. She did not know if he was reading seriously, but he seemed to be in a daze. Gong Fan's results were very good. Usually, even if he did not listen in class, as long as he was called by the teacher, no matter what the question was, he would be able to handle it with ease. In the past, when he was in class, he often slept. At first, the teacher was a little reluctant, so he called him to solve the problem. All the children were waiting to see him embarrass himself. However, they did not expect Gong Fan to walk to the blackboard and use the chalk to solve the question perfectly. Everyone was stunned. Chapter 4036. There were really geniuses who just glanced at the textbook when school started and didn't need to listen to the class anymore. In addition, the elementary school questions were relatively simple and not difficult. Therefore, even if Xiao Chen didn't listen in class, the teacher didn't care. Qinger secretly wrote a line of words and handed it over when the teacher wasn't paying attention. Gong Fan took it and saw Qinger's reply. "Why do you ask?" She seemed to be trembling with fear and a little shy. Qinger was a little restless. She didn't know the meaning of Gong Fan's note. Could it be that Gong Fan liked her too? She liked Gong Fan. This was a secret that almost all the girls in the class knew. Therefore, Qinger was very isolated. She wasn't isolated because she liked Gong Fan. There were so many girls who liked Gong Fan, so they wouldn't isolate Qinger. It was just that Qinger was Gong Fan's deskmate. This made many people jealous. Gong Fan was famous in the school. Many children in the classroom next door would secretly pass by the classroom and pretend to be unintentional to sneak a peek at Gong Fan. Sometimes, during the afternoon break, Gong Fan would rest on the table. Many children would just lie on the window and watch him for the entire afternoon break. Sometimes, the school would organize spring and autumn outings. They would line up according to their seats and the teacher would ask the deskmates to hold hands. Therefore, as Gong Fan's deskmate, Qinger enjoyed privileges that many people yearned for but couldn't get. For example, she could sit in the same seat as Gong Fan on the bus. When queuing, she could hold Gong Fan's hand. During class, she would sit next to Gong Fan for almost the entire day. She could admire Gong Fan's beauty up close. It was not surprising that she was isolated. Another reason was that Qinger was the daughter of the dean. Therefore, she also enjoyed many privileges. For example, every semester the seats would be rearranged. Only Qinger's seat would always be next to Gong Fan. It was impossible for them to be deskmates for 3 years without special arrangements. Therefore, Qinger was very isolated. In fact, this seating arrangement was not requested by Qinger. It was specially arranged by Qinger's mother, who was the dean. Gong Fan and Xiao Yichen's family background was unknown. The school kept it a secret. Even if it was a parent-teacher meeting, if Yun Shishir disguised herself, very few parents would be able to recognize her. However, the dean had the right to know. She knew Gong Fan's background, so she specially arranged for her daughter to sit next to him. It was naturally beneficial for the two children have a good relationship. As a result, Qinger was able to get her wish, to sit next to Gong Fan after changing seats almost every semester. Gong Fan's height was constantly increasing, and his seat was slowly leaning towards the back. Qinger's unshakable height was also sitting at the back with Gong Fan. Such an illogical arrangement naturally made many children's twos. Ants to their age. TTSSS. S. TT. S2s to S. His personality was relatively straightforward. 3 words. I don't like you. Left almost no face for her. Teet. T. Teet to Teet twos. Chapter 4037. He didn't like her. He didn't like her. He said that he didn't like her. Then, why did he ask her, do you like him or not? Qinger couldn't figure it out, but the truth was right in front of her eyes. She couldn't deny it. You didn't like her. This fact almost destroyed her like the end of the world. Qinger bit her lip hard and covered her face with her textbook. Her tears dripped onto the table. When little Yichen, who was behind her, saw this, he stuck his head out to look, but he did not know what was written on the note. He was curious for a moment, and when he saw Qinger crying so sadly, he became even more curious. Wah! She seemed to be crying very sadly. Gong Fan must have made her cry. This younger brother of his was really terrible. He always made girls cry. Why was he so fierce to girls? He couldn't help but wonder if Gong Fan had written something outrageous on the note. Mm, he was still the best. At least, he would never make Lisa cry or upset her. He was the only one who was beaten to tears by her. But then again, what exactly did Gong Fan write that made her so sad? Didn't she ask him to be more tactful? Xiao Yichen stretched his neck, trying to see what was written on the note. Mu Yichen. When the teacher called out his name, he was so shocked that he stood up, looking embarrassed. What? Ha ha ha. There was a burst of laughter. Many of them covered their mouths and secretly sized up Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen looked around speechlessly and saw others looking at him gloatingly. What are you laughing at? He furrowed his eyebrows and snorted. The teacher asked, What are you doing? I'm not doing anything. Then why are you stretching your neck? When Xiao Yichen heard this, he pretended to be calm. Teacher, this is not an exam. I'm not peeping at other people's answers. Ha 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 ha. Everyone laughed again. The teacher was a little angry. Then can you explain the grammatical difference between the past tense and the present tense? Xiao Yichen was dumbfounded. He didn't understand. He looked at the teacher. The teacher looked at him. They stared at each other. The scene fell silent for a moment. Gong Fan turned back to look at Mu Yichen, then turned back silently. Gong Fan, answer this. Gong Fan did not even stand up. He said indifferently, Don't ask me this kind of question. This time it was the teacher's turn to be embarrassed. He asked somewhat uneasily, What do you mean? Only an idiot wouldn't know such a simple question. The idiot behind him was so angry that his whole body trembled. He gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. Have you ever seen a younger brother who would tear down his brother's stage? This younger brother of his was too much. After class, Qinger was still lying on the table. She buried her face in her arms and couldn't be seen clearly. But looking at her shoulders heaving up and down, one could guess that she must be crying. She was crying very hard. However, Gong Fan pretended not to see it and did not even say a word of comfort. If it had been Yu, he would have stepped forward and comforted her like a gentleman. When Xiao Yichen saw this, he couldn't help but feel sorry for her. He gently moved closer to Gong Fan's ear and said uneasily, How long is she going to cry for? Gong Fan didn't say anything. Xiao Yichen expected better from him. Can't you say a few words of comfort? What does it have to do with me? She's crying because of you. Does it have nothing to do with you? Chapter 40:38. Then why is she crying so hard? Gong Fan shook his head with an indifferent expression. Xiao Yichen felt helpless too. Even though he sympathized with Qinger, he didn't know how to comfort a crying girl. Just like that, Qinger was in a daze for the entire day and had no energy left. That was how Gong Fan went about his business. However, something happened in the afternoon. Look, where's Qinger's love letter? Let me see who it's for. During lunch break, a mischievous boy took a book from Qinger's desk and realized that Qinger had written a few pages of a love letter. Hence, he took advantage of the fact that Qinger wasn't in the classroom to announce it. The boy took a look and showed it to everyone, saying, Wow, it's for you. Let me read it out loud for all of you. Hence, the boy read out the contents of the love letter to everyone with great emotion. You, do you know? I've liked you since the first time I saw you. Even though you don't like to talk and ignore me, it doesn't affect my love for you. At first, I was curious about you and didn't understand why you didn't pay attention in class. But no matter what the questions were, they couldn't stump you. I feel like you're Superman. The boy read out the love letter with great emotion. The others crowded around and fought over it from time to time, wanting to see Qinger's love letter with their own eyes. Just then, Qinger walked into the classroom with a stack of homework books. She had just returned from the teacher's office. As she was the class representative, she had to go to the teacher's office every afternoon to get her graded homework. She wasn't in a good mood. When she entered the classroom and saw many people crowding around the podium, she didn't pay much attention to it. It wasn't until she heard some familiar phrases when the homework books were distributed that she looked at the podium in surprise. She saw everyone sizing her up with smiles on their faces. Some of them looked at her with ridicule, some snickered, some looked at her with contempt, and some looked at her with disdain. Those piercing gazes seemed to be mocking her for thinking too highly of herself. The boy laughed and said, "Qing'er, you're indeed the language class representative. Your writing style is so good." As he spoke, he proudly waved the love letter in his hand and playfully stuck out his tongue. Qing'er shuddered, and her face flushed red with shame and indignation. You stole my notebook." "Notebook? Is this a notebook?" This boy doesn't get along with Qing'er very well. In the past, during self-study, Qing'er was also a disciplinary committee member. She was a very serious girl and was very serious about rules. However, there were always some naughty children in the class who did not abide by the rules of self-study, including this boy. She had remembered his name more than once, so the boy had always mocked her for being a tattletale and went against her at every turn. Taking advantage of Qing'er's absence, the boy secretly flipped through her desk. Unexpectedly, he found a love letter secretly written to Yu. So he spread the news. Qing'er flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Li Siqing, what are you doing? I didn't expect that as the class committee member and the language class representative, you didn't study hard and wanted to learn how to date like an adult. You even wanted to confess to Yu. Why don't you take a look at yourself? Yu is so outstanding. Would he like you?